Good evening. I call to order the meeting of the Board of Education of Baltimore County for Tuesday, September 15th, 2020. At this time, Baltimore County Public Schools and offices are closed to the public in order to maintain the health and safety of our staff and students. This evening's Board of Education meeting is being held virtually and broadcast through our live stream on BCPS website or on BCPS-TV Xfinity Channel 73 and Verizon Fios Channel 34. In order to efficiently conduct this meeting, all voting items will be conducted by a roll call vote. Board members will say their names before making and seconding a motion, and as well as when requesting discussion on an agenda item. May I have a motion to go into closed session as permitted by the Opens Meetings Act, as found in the Annotated Code of Maryland, General Provisions, Article 3-305, B1 and B7, to 1, discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom it has jurisdiction, or any other personnel matters that involves one or more specific individuals. And 7, consult with counsel to obtain legal advice. May I have a motion?
So moved, Mac.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Offerman, second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Dr. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Ms. Hester?
Yes.
Mr. Offerman?
Yes.
Mr. Mahomza?
Yes.
Ms. Hem?
Yes.
Ms. Causey?
Yes.
Ms. Jost?
Yes.
Mr. McMillian?
Yes.
Ms. Mack?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Rowe?
Yes.
Thank you. You're muted, Ms. Causey.
Ms. Gover, please call the roll to identify all staff that are present.
Thank you. Dr. Williams?
Present.
Mr. Dickerson?
Present.
Ms. Lowry?
Present.
Ms. Howie?
Here.
And Mr. Brusades?
I'm here.
Are there any other staff members on the call? Thank you.
Good evening. I now call to order the meeting of the Board of Education of Baltimore County for September 15th, 2020. I invite you to rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, which will be led by student member of the board, Mr. Josh Humamza. We will then have a moment of silence in recognition of those who have served education in Baltimore County. Mr. Mahomza?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mahomza. In accordance with the mandated direction of the State Superintendent, Baltimore County Public Schools and offices are currently closed to the public in order to maintain the health and safety of our students and staff. In accordance with the Board of Education's resolution approved at the March 10th, 2020 meeting, in the event of a medical or health emergency related to COVID-19, the board chair, in consultation with the vice chair and the superintendent, may declare that a board meeting or a board committee meeting may be held remotely in its entirety without the physical presence of board members, subject to the establishment of a mechanism that would allow each board member the opportunity to fully participate in the meeting despite not being physically present, and that would allow the public to also remotely attend those portions of the meeting that are open pursuant to the Opens Meetings Act by being able to listen and or view those portions of the meeting. As a result, tonight's board meeting is being held virtually and broadcast through live stream on the BCPS website and through Comcast Xfinity Channel 73 and Verizon Fios Channel 34. In order to efficiently conduct this meeting, all voting items this evening will be done by a roll call vote. Board members will say their names before making and seconding a motion as applicable, as well as when requesting an agenda item. The first meeting on the agenda is consideration of the agenda for this evening. Dr. Williams, are there any additions or changes to tonight's agenda?
Good evening. There are no changes or additions to tonight's agenda.
Excuse me, this is Ms. Scott.
Yes, Ms. Scott.
Yes, I'd like to add to tonight's agenda for us to review the equity audit presentation and report. I was thinking it could go under, it looks like item K, after item 1, after the report on 2020 summer learning. I'd like to make the motion to add the equity audit and report to the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second, Molly. Oh.
Second, Molly. So we're voting on whether we're adding the agenda item. Ms. Scott, do you want to speak to your suggestion, speak to your motion?
Yes, certainly. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to my motion. Basically, it's not business as usual. It's not back to school as usual. We're coming off of COVID-19, and there have been discrepancies and gaps that have happened for our students. And I feel that it's important that we discuss that on the front end as opposed to on the back end. I'm looking at us being proactive, looking at where the gaps are and addressing them at the beginning of the school year, as opposed to waiting later in the school year and addressing them in a reactive measure. The report, which was prepared by BCPS staff, led by Dr. Lisa Williams, was very profound and showed where we have a large amount of inequities among BCPS students. And I feel it's a people's report, and that it should be available and heard by all of our constituents and everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Other board members, I see Ms. Henn.
Thank you, Mrs. Causey. I have a question, and this may be best directed to Dr. Williams. Are staff prepared to present this report this evening?
At this time, I am unable to answer that. I would have to then reach out to Dr. Williams and that team. If there's still more conversation, I should be able to have an update as soon as possible.
Excuse me, if I could respond to that. Staff presented the report to the Equity Committee, and they already developed a presentation, and the report has already been completed. So they've already presented it. So it would be basically representing what was already presented. So it wouldn't be anything new that staff had to prepare. Thank you.
So Ms. Scott, to your point, and to Ms. Henn's point, the board officers routinely reach out to board members for suggestions for agenda items, and then we have a meeting with the superintendent in order to evaluate the priorities, also time-defined activities that we have to take, whether it's contracts, personnel. The capital budget, for instance, is time-constrained due to reports that are due to the state. So I did not receive a request to include this in tonight's meeting, and we do not have any documents attached to board docs related to that. So I would suggest that we change I would make a friendly change to your motion that we process this at the very next board meeting rather than this evening.
Thank you for that. I believe I did send that to you in an email, and I will look through to get the date of when that was sent over, because I did ask for it to be included, as well as we brought it up in the Equity Committee meeting that it would be included in the coming board meeting. That was something that was discussed in the past, had to be included, and that we would be presented. And I believe you were in attendance at that meeting, so at Equity Committee meeting. And so I believe it was understood that it would be presented at the next board meeting.
No, I did not receive that specific request, and the board docs is released to the board members and also to the public. So I would suggest in the future that if board members want to review it and then reach out to us as soon as possible, then it may be more, then we may be able to have staff prepared and Dr. Williams can evaluate what he would need to do to fit that into the meeting. But in my opinion, we are not prepared to do that this evening. And I do agree with you that the equity report and dealing with those issues of equity, especially regarding this unusual school year, are important to address as soon as possible. But we do have, so I've made my points and I will move on to other board members. Ms. Joes, I believe you were next.
Yes, I looked at the, gosh, why is there a, so I looked at the audit committee, no, I'm sorry, the equity committee meeting, and I believe that at the end of the meeting, you were present, Ms. Scott did say that this was to be brought to the full board, and I was under the impression that it would come to the full board at this meeting, because to reiterate what Ms. Scott said, there really is no season for equity. This is an unprecedented pandemic that's happening, and we need to address this now and not shove it under the carpet. I believe the presentation is already done, and I don't know if Mr. Billy Burke is online or Dr. Lisa Williams, but it should be a fairly easy presentation for everybody to see. The board needs to see this. They need to hear this.
So thank you for that. And I do know that the equity committee is televised and everyone does have the opportunity to go back and watch the presentation and also to review the attached documents. This is an issue of us having the meetings, being respectful of staff in preparation, being respectful of the superintendent in having his staff available. Ms. Henn, and then, okay, Ms. Henn.
Thank you. So I agree, this needs to be at the forefront of our work. And I would have wanted to prepare for this discussion, to review the materials in advance before we have such an important presentation. I would have spent considerable time reviewing the report, reviewing the presentation. I mean, I want to hear about this as much as anyone making this motion, and would fully support adding it to the agenda for next meeting so that board members have a chance to prepare and ask thoughtful questions. So by all means, I support putting this at the forefront of our work, but I feel unprepared to have this discussion tonight, and I feel it's unfair to ask staff to also deliver it tonight. So I would not support this motion only because I feel unprepared to have such an important conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other board members that have not yet spoken to this issue that want to speak to it? Okay, then I see Ms. Scott and Mr. Mahamza. So Ms. Scott, I think had her hand. Okay, thank you. Ms. Scott.
Scott, and thank you for everyone who's commented so far. Equity isn't something that you prepare for. Equity is something that we do, and that should be a fabric of who we are, number one. Number two, I was able to go through our email thanks to this lecture as far as the procedure within which and something to add.
Scott, you're breaking up.
Sorry, I apologize for me breaking up. What I said is that equity is not something that you prepare for. Equity should be in the fabric of everything that we do. It's not a season. It's not something to prepare for. It's who we are, what we do, and it should be at the forefront of everything that we do for our children. This is not business as usual. It's COVID-19. We are in a global pandemic. We do not need to be reactionary in our response to inequities to all of our students, number one. Number two, I went back and as Ms. Causey basically spoke about procedures with which to add something to the agenda. I sent an email August 25th asking it to be added to the agenda, the full report. Ms. Causey, if you go back to your emails and reference it, you will find that email that I sent. It was not something that was last minute or haphazard. It was something that I specifically asked to be added to the agenda. So I would like members to consider that equity is not something, again, Ms. Henn said she was unprepared for it, but our students were unprepared for the inequitable treatment that they may be feeling or receiving. And as a board, we need to lead in that area so that we are forefront of it and not reacting to the inequities that our students are receiving in regards to whether it's digital technology or anything, whatever that may be. So thank you.
So we, board members, we have Mr. Mahamza, Ms. Pastor, and Mr. Kuhn, and we should really follow parliamentary procedure, and if there's been spoken twice, that other board members would speak, and then we would vote. So we have Mr. Mahamza, and then Ms. Pastor, and then Mr. Kuhn.
Yeah, just two things I wanted to point out. Staff, Ms. Williams did not, Dr. Williams did not say that she's not prepared, and like Ms. Scott just said numerous times, we've already received this presentation. I was able to attend that meeting, and which was significant is that I didn't look at any of that presentation prior to hand. I just got the chance to absorb every single thing that Dr. Williams was telling us and all that information, which was startling. And what I recall she said is that when you're looking at equity, you should first absorb what you see, the data that is being reported, then take action based off that. So it's something like you prepare for, like Ms. Scott said. And I just think it's about time we have this conversation. Thank you.
Ms. Pastor?
Thank you. I'm just confused here. I want a full conversation about it. I had forgotten that I saw this at Equity when I referred to the information that Ms. White might have gleaned when she did her report. Can I go back to Dr. Williams' comment? And this is Darrell Williams' comment about preparedness. And my question first and foremost, is Dr. Lisa Williams prepared to speak to the data given? Because what I see is not even one meeting. I can see if she's prepared, anybody can listen to the information, because one of the things that she said was, don't do all of us. Don't take this information and then start talking about what we're going to do about it. We need to absorb it. So in preparation is more than reading it. If she is prepared tonight to hear it, it doesn't take long for her to articulate the data, and she could do that. And then because it is important, I would see then us taking the time and putting it as a large chunk of the next agenda to have a conversation about what we heard, as she indicated at the equity meeting. Look at it, what we saw. This is good instruction. We hear it, we see it, we think about it, we talk about it, we write down some things about it, and then we are able to completely address it. I don't want to try to take something that's this important and throw it in the night, but I would think that if she is available to give that data or some of it, the most salient pieces, it's worth hearing tonight and then seeing it and then putting it on the agenda for real conversation. Too important to just sort of swallow up tonight in the midst of other things.
Dr. Williams, if you could address that for Ms. Pastor, please.
So good evening, board. We try to have staff available when we know potential questions and topics. Right now, as it was indicated, was a great presentation shared at the Equity Committee. Dr. Lisa Williams was not notified to be available tonight. So that's the update that I have at this time. We do have Mr. Billy Burke, who was also a part of that presentation, but I just wanted to follow up Unfortunately, we don't have the entire team that was there during the equity committee meeting. I think everyone raised a valid point. And again, we plan, and unfortunately, we weren't aware that this was going to be a topic for discussion. Hence, we would have had staff available to present. And I agree that everything that we do should be through the lens of equity. So it's just a matter of just the next steps in terms of what the board wants us to do.
Thank you. Ms. Rowe? Ms. Rowe, did you have your hand up?
Yes. Is it possible, because one of the things we're discussing tonight is how virtual learning is going. And we know that the African American community gets COVID-19 at a much greater rate. And so what I'd like to know is it possible for Mr. Burke or some staff member to give a brief overview of the data as Ms. Pasteur suggested? Because I do think that brief overview of the data is pertinent also to that discussion. But I do think we should have a much bigger discussion allotted in next agenda for the next meeting, because these are important issues.
Thank you, Mr. Kuhn.
Oh, thanks. I fully support Mrs. Scott's motion. Unfortunately, with Dr. Williams saying that Dr. Lisa Williams is not available, I would just leave it up to Ms. Scott if she wants to have this at this meeting or if she wants to delay it to the next meeting. Thank you.
So, Mr. Kuhn, did you want Ms. Scott to reply to you specifically?
Yes, if she does not want to delay it, I will support it at this meeting or the next.
And I can respond. Thank you for the opportunity to do so, and thank you, Russ. I would like it presented at this meeting. I feel it is important that we as a board get out, and I hope everyone can hear me. I feel that it is important that we as a board get out in front of any inequities that may exist. I feel that we need to have this report presented to us so that we know where we stand. Plus, as I said, this report was done by BCPS. This is the people's report. This is not my personal report. I want to make sure that our constituents, our stakeholders, board members, everyone hears where we are and what we're doing. I feel that's very important. Also, I've been looking at who is available, as Dr. Williams said. Dr. Williams is not available. I'm sure someone can reach out to her, but I do see that Dr. Moni Philip Wheatley is available, as well as Mr. Billy Burke. And they were both present when the report was made. So it's a presentation that I feel important and that is important that I feel that we need to do. So I would like to go forward with presenting this. I don't feel that the staff is unprepared. Our staff can walk and chew gum at the same time. And they've been doing that, and they are very knowledgeable of what's going on. So I would like this report so that we as parents, of which I'm also a parent, can know where we stand and where we are going. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Williams, you had wanted to make a comment?
So we can, looking at the agenda, we can potentially to get Mr. Billy Burke prepared. It's not going to be the same, I'm sure, but we value Mr. Billy Burke because I know it was a dual presentation. And as Ms. Scott said, Dr. Wheatley Phillip was present as well. We can potentially give an overview after our presentation or sometime in the mix of the summer learning and the virtual learning. Staff, I've been responding to staff to try to provide an overview as much as they can based on what was shared at the Equity Committee meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. With that information, board members, I think that we're prepared to take a vote. Is there any other before we take a vote?
Yeah.
Oh, Ms. Pasteur?
Yeah, that's fine, but they've just said it's an overview. I'm holding to what I said initially. I think that it's fine, and we need to hear the numbers so that we can absorb. But I'm going to go back to what you suggested, Ms. Causey. I would like, after we hear these numbers, for staff now, between now and the next board meeting, to have a real presentation where we talk about not just those numbers. I want to follow Dr. Lisa Williams' lead and process and hear from them, the experts, along with the superintendent and any staff he gleans, where we go from here. What road do we take? I don't want to just hear those numbers. I want to follow Dr. Lisa Williams' lead. Where are we in processing the numbers? I get the importance. That's what I said. And I would still like you, Ms. Causey, Ms. Henn, and Dr. Williams to put Dr. Lisa Williams and whomever else on the next agenda as well to talk about some next steps in terms of where we go after we hear if this is voted for tonight, after we hear these numbers and Mr. Burke gives the report.
Thank you. Board members, Ms. Henn, do you have your hand up for this issue?
I'm sorry, can I raise a point of order? Ms. Pasteur, was that a motion?
No, there's already, excuse me, excuse me, there's already a motion with a second on the floor. It's Ms. Scott's motion in a second. And we have been discussing it for about 20 minutes. So I do believe that we are prepared.
No, that was not a motion.
Dr. Williams, we are prepared with Dr. Williams' additional information to take a vote on Ms. Scott's request to add the presentation from the Equity Committee.
So thank you, Ms. Causey. So I want to agree with Ms. Pasteur's non-motion that she just made the comment on, which is to add Dr. Lisa Williams to the next meeting agenda, because I believe we need to do this right. And I don't think that, I want to go on record as this is not the right way to do it. This is not an afterthought. This doesn't belong as a topic you add to the agenda at the last minute. It should have been added. It should have been thoughtfully planned. Staff should have had the opportunity to plan for this. The board officers and superintendent worked too hard to thoughtfully plan every meeting agenda for this to be added at the last minute. It's not the way to do justice to a topic that's as important as equity. This is, like I said, at the forefront of our work. Yes, it needs to be discussed. Yes, it needs to be presented. This is not the way to go about doing it. I will support this motion because we need to talk about it at every opportunity, but it's not the way to do it. Board members need to work with board officers and the superintendent to do it the right way. So while I will support this motion, it's not the way it needs to be done.
Thank you. Board members, we need to move forward. Everyone has had an opportunity to speak. Excuse me, everyone has had an opportunity to speak. Some board members have spoken 3 or 4 times already. So I do believe that we have the information.
I'm one of those who's spoken 3 or 4 times. This is Ms. Scott, and I would just like to say that I did send it in the right way. As Ms. Henn said, there's not a right way to do it, and it's not the right way to do it. The right way to do it is to send in an email, which is what I did. I did send that in. I also
so Ms. Scott, I would also, Ms. Scott.
So I did speak about it, so I did do it the right way. And when it comes to equity or inequity, there is no right way or wrong way. As a person myself of color who has been the recipient and who has been on the back end of inequity, there is no right way or wrong way to do it. And I sent the email. I alerted you that I would like to be a part of it, but it was not included on the agenda. So for all of our students of color and myself as a woman of color, I feel that this is not something that should be on the back burner. I feel that this is something that we should look at. And I wanted to make sure that it was brought up. because inequity is not something that we need to look at later on. It's something that we need to look at all the time. It needs to be the fabric of who we are as a school board and what we look at. So that is why I brought it up. And
Ms.
I did
Scott,
do it
thank
right
you
because
for
I
your-
sent it to you on August 25th. It was sent to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. And this board agenda has been out to the public and to all of the board members to review, and certainly it is up to, excuse me, and certainly it is appropriate for board members to alert the superintendent or the board officers in advance of the meeting if there was something that they felt was left off, again, so that staff can prepare. So, Ms. Gover, if you can please take a roll call vote.
Dr. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Ms. Tester?
Yes.
Mr. Offerman?
Yes.
Mr. Mahomza?
Yes.
Ms. Henn?
Yes.
Ms. Causey?
Yes.
Ms. Jost? Ms. Jost?
Yes.
Mr. McMillian?
Yes.
Ms. Mack?
No.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Rowe?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the agenda will be adjusted, as Dr. Williams has indicated, as part of the virtual learning update. Mr. Burke, I believe, will be leading that. Is that correct, Dr. Williams?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So in accordance with Board Policy 8314, when there is a majority vote of the board, an agenda item can be added or removed from the agenda item. So the agenda is accepted as amended. The next item on the agenda is minutes of closed session. Earlier this evening, the board met in closed session pursuant to the Open Meetings Act for the following reasons. To one, discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom it has jurisdiction, or any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals. And seven, consult with counsel to obtain legal advice. The minutes of the closed session and informational summary can be found on our website at bcps.org/board/informational-summaries.html. The next item on the agenda is new business, personnel matters, and for that we call forward Ms. Lowry.
Good evening, Chairwoman Causey, Vice Chairwoman Henn, Superintendent Williams, and members of the board. I would like the board's consent for the following personnel matters: retirements, resignations, leaves, recognition of deceased, certificated appointments, and contract renewals.
Do I have a motion to approve the personnel matters as presented in Exhibits D1 through D6?
So moved, Offerman.
Seconded, Kuhn.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Madam Chair, before we vote, may we separate the contract renewals?
Is that item D6? Yes. So if we can vote on items D1 through D5, please, Ms. Gover.
Dr. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Ms. Tester?
Yes.
Mr. Offerman?
Yes.
Mr. Mahomza?
Yes.
Ms. Henn?
Yes.
Ms. Causey?
Yes.
Ms. Jost?
Yes.
Mr. McMillian?
Yes.
Ms. Mack?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Rowe?
Yes.
Thank you. May I have a roll call vote on item D6, please?
Dr. Hager? Dr. Hager?
Abstain.
Mr. Kuhn,
Abstain.
Ms. Pasteur,
Abstain.
Mr. Offerman,
Abstain.
Mr. Mahomza,
I can't see the contract in D6, so I guess I'll abstain.
It was in the executive content.
Mine is blank. I don't see it.
in closed session.
Yeah, I'm on closed session right now. I see the other items, but I don't see that D6 contract too. I guess
It is the contracts.
Excuse me, Ms. Gover, if you can assist.
Ms. Causey,
Yes, Ms. Rowe.
I'd like to point out that I don't think it's unclear. I don't think the board is clear on what they're voting for.
Yes.
So item D6 is a personnel matter, and the documents were presented in the personnel in the closed session, and they are in the executive content. If we need to start the vote over with board members having that information. Ms. Gover, if you can start the roll call vote over.
Dr. Hager,
Abstain.
Mr. Kuhn,
Abstain.
Ms. Pasteur, Ms. Pasteur,
Yes.
Mr. Offerman,
Yes.
Mr. Mahomza,
I guess abstain. Can't see. I still can't see it. And the question I have, I don't think it might be violating the OMA. So I don't
Ms.
know.
Causey, I object to taking this vote when Mr. Mahomza and other members can't see the content and don't know what they're voting on.
I agree with Ms. Rowe.
Mr. Brusades, if you could chime in on this issue. Excuse me, let me just take a moment and review the board docs. The items are there in board docs in closed session for board members to review. They were reviewed earlier.
Other board members have told me the item that's being discussed, but under my view, it's under D5. I guess then I know the item, so I guess we can proceed with the vote.
Ms. Gover, if you can proceed.
Mr. Mahomza, Mr. Mahomza,
I think he's muted.
Mr. Mahomza, we cannot hear you.
I'll come back to him. Ms.
Thank
Ham?
you.
Abstain.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Under my view, it was under D5, but I vote for this item.
In favor?
Yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Hem?
Abstain.
Ms. Causey?
Abstain.
Ms. Jose,
Yes.
Mr. McMillian,
Yes.
Ms. Mack,
Abstain.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Ms. Rowe.
Yes.
That's 7 in favor.
Thank you. The motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Lowry.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is new business administrative appointments, and for that, we call on Dr. Williams.
So good evening, board members, Madam Chair. I would like to bring forward for your approval the following administrative appointments. Assistant Principal at Mays Chapel Elementary School, Assistant Principal at Chapel Hill Elementary School, Manager Employee Benefits in the Office of Benefits, Leaves, and Retirement, Manager of the Office of Employee Absence and Risk Management, Coordinator Teaching and Learning in the Office of Special Education, Director in the Office of Facilities Operations, and Executive Director, School Support, Elementary, Office of the Community Superintendent, West Zone.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the administrative appointments as presented in Exhibit E1?
So moved.
Thank you,
Second,
Mr.
Offerman.
Who was first, please?
Me, I'm fine. Offerman.
Okay, and second, please?
Mack.
Thank you. Any discussion? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Dr. Hager,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn,
Yes.
Ms. Pasteur,
Yes.
Mr. Offerman,
Yes.
Mr. Mahomza,
Yes.
Ms. Henn,
Yes.
Ms. Causey,
Yes.
Ms. Jose,
Yes.
Mr. McMillian,
Yeah.
Ms. Mack,
Yes.
Ms. Scott, Ms. Scott, Ms. Rowe,
Yes.
Ms. Scott. Favors 11.
I apologize, excuse me. What are we voting on again? If you could repeat it?
We are voting on the administrative appointments that are presented in Exhibit E1.
Perfect, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously. Dr. Williams?
All right, so our first appointed candidate is Lisa Balmagis, the Assistant Principal at Mays Chapel Elementary School. She brings 14 years of experience. The current position is teacher at Northwood Elementary School, teacher mathematics resource previously at White Oak, and prior to that, she served as the instrumental music teacher at Logan Elementary in White Oak. She also had years of experience at Howard County Public Schools and Broward County Public Schools. Congratulations, Ms. Balmagis. Our next appointed candidate is Julie Mentines, Assistant Principal at Chapel Hill Elementary School. Her current position is a teacher at Grange Elementary School. Prior to that, she served as a special ed teacher at Grange Elementary School, as well as classroom teacher. She brings 16 years of experience in Baltimore County Public Schools. Congratulations, Ms. Mentines. Our next appointed candidate is Christine Kosoboom, Manager, Employee Benefits, Office of Benefits, Leaves, and Retirement. She is new to Baltimore County Public Schools, so welcome. Current position, Director of Employee Benefits, the Archdiocese of Baltimore. Prior to that, she served as the Benefit Operations Manager at Johns Hopkins Health System, Director of Accounts Services at Richard J. Krasinski and Associates, Manager of Business Operations at Milligan Health Services, Senior Customer Service Representative, as well as Customer Service Representative at Magellan Health Services. So welcome aboard, Ms. Kosoboom. Welcome to Baltimore County Public Schools and congratulations. Our next appointed candidate is Asada Peterson, Manager, Office of Employee Absence and Risk Management. She brings 6 years of service in Baltimore County. Currently, she's the Equal Employment Opportunity Officer in the Office of Equal Employment Opportunity. Prior to that, she serves as a contractual EEO officer in the Office of Employment Dispute Resolution and a host of other positions as an attorney, claims review attorney, the Sheelis Law Firm, the Christensen Ahert LLP, Law Office of Dennis Schoen, and the Illinois Appellate Court, First District, the Office of the Illinois Attorney General, and the Office of the State Appellate Defender. So congratulations, Ms. Peterson. Our next appointed candidate is Deirdre Lynch, Coordinator, Teaching and Learning, Office of Special Education. She brings 15 years of service in Baltimore County. Current position as Assistant Principal at Honeygo Elementary School. Prior to that, she served as the Assistant Principal at Relay Elementary School. And prior to that, she was a Special Education Inclusion Teacher, Oliver Branch Elementary School. Congratulations, Ms. Lynch. The next candidate is Elizabeth Becker, Director, Office of Facilities Operations. Current position is Manager of Logistics in the Office of Logistics, and previous experience at Kinco Logistics Services and Owens and Minor Company for 22 years. So congratulations, Ms. Becker. And our last appointed candidate is Dr. Adrian Morrow, Executive Director, School Support, Elementary, Office of the Community Superintendent. She is new to Baltimore County Public Schools, so welcome. Her current position, Director of Learning Achievement and Administration in the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Schools in Montgomery County Public Schools. Prior to that, she served as the principal of East Silver Spring, the Focus School in Montgomery County for 10 years, assistant principal at Rolling Terrace Elementary School prior to her principalship, and prior to that, she served as the principal intern at George and Ford's Elementary School. She also has served as a staff development teacher, reading initiative teacher, and teacher of grades 3 and K-2. Congratulations, Dr. Morrow, and welcome aboard. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations and welcome. Our next item is public comment. The members of the board appreciate hearing from interested citizens. As appropriate, we will refer your concerns to the superintendent for follow-up by his staff. The board is currently accepting written public comments. The board discourages comment on specific student or employee matters, comment on matters that do not relate to public education in Baltimore County, and inappropriate personal remarks. Comments from stakeholder groups and other members of the public may be emailed to boe@bcps.org. All comments will be distributed to the Board of Education members, and the board reserves the right to disseminate public comments through board docs as long as the comments adhere to the board's stated guidelines, include the name of the submitter, have been received before 11:59 p.m. on the Monday before each board meeting. I want to announce an adjustment to our meetings, starting with its September 29th, 2020 meeting. The Board of Education of Baltimore County will conduct the public comment portion of the meeting by allowing members of the public to call in by phone. A person or stakeholder group representative who wishes to address the board will now be able to submit a registration form to the Office of the Board of Education. Registration will open 1 week prior to the board meeting date and close at 3 p.m. on the day before the meeting. As is our practice, public comment is limited to 10 speakers. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and the registration is first come, first served. If selected, participants will receive confirmation of their registration along with the call-in number, passcode to join the meeting, and public comment guidelines and procedures. More information will be provided on the board's website, and we appreciate the work of our assistant and staff on creating this opportunity for our public. Public comment that had been received and adheres to the guidelines has been attached to board docs as an item of information, and all board members and the superintendent have received that public comment. The next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report, and so we call on Dr. Williams.
So good evening and welcome to the 2020-2021 school year. It is wonderful to have virtual learning well underway in our second week of school. Last week, I enjoyed talking to students, educators, and staff in virtual classrooms at our newest school buildings for Chadwick and Colgate elementary schools, at schools distributing materials, and at meal distribution sites. Speaking of meals, staff from our offices of Food and Nutrition Services and Transportation collaborated to provide more than 1.9 million meals during the summer. Our staff resumed serving meals on our first day of school last week at all middle and high schools, in addition to 271 locations. Typically, meals are now distributed on Mondays and Wednesdays through December 31st. But schedules will be adjusted for holidays. In addition, when students return to buildings, students at 87 schools will receive breakfast and lunch at no cost and without household applications, thanks to the Community Eligibility Provision, CEP. You will hear plenty of details tonight about our many summer learning opportunities, but I want to highlight two programs. First, more than 52,000 students participated in our first ever virtual summer learning hike to practice math and reading. A huge thank you to our Division of Curriculum and Instruction for creating and supporting this program. I'd also like to thank our principals for the many ways in which they prepared for a school year like no other. In particular, principals led summer re-engagement opportunities to connect with families, let them know how much we care, and get students off to the best possible start. As I mentioned, and despite the many challenges of these times, construction is complete on the new buildings for Chadwick Elementary School and Colgate Elementary School. In addition, work on the new building for Berkshire Elementary School is scheduled to be finalized in mid-October. We celebrate these school communities and we thank our central office and school-based staff for their hard work. And the new state guidance. As you know, the state has provided additional guidance about reopening. On August 27, Governor Hogan and State Superintendent Dr. Karen Salmon encouraged school systems to reopen for in-person learning. On September 1st, the State Board of Education approved minimum recommended hours of live instruction. We are considering this guidance and will share any adjustments as soon as we're able to. Once again, welcome back to school and thank you. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. The next item on the agenda is the chair's report. And this evening, I just want to say thank you to all of the staff, educators, and administrators that have worked so diligently in order to prepare for this virtual learning. On the board, we have 7 parents, and we also have grandparents that are engaged in assisting their students in this virtual learning semester. So we are very engaged with what is happening, and we understand that while things have been amazing in terms of the teachers' engagement with the students, I was pleased to attend the material distribution at Cedarmere Elementary School with Dr. Williams, where there was a lot of engagement and support and enthusiasm and positive energy. Now, we know that there is a lot of wonderful things that are happening, but it is a big adjustment. And so we just ask that we all are patient and encouraging to our students and also encouraging to the staff as they embark on this with just their hearts wanting to be connected with their students, but they have to do it this way for this time. Usually on the first day, there's a big caravan, there's a tour, and the board members, elected officials, caravan around with the superintendent to a variety of schools. So this year we were not able to do that, but the superintendent did arrange times that board members could attend meal distributions at certain schools or the material distributions. So there is still a lot of positive energy that's going on and happening on the first day of school. I would also like to address concerns that have been heard. We have heard at the board and also have been forwarded to the superintendent. There have been issues with technology, and we can and we must do better for our students and our teachers. And we do know that improvements were made last week and that there's going to be adjustments and improvements ongoing. I also want to thank partnerships that will be coming through the community in terms of helping our families and our students. There's been really a wide range of support. I also want to say that even though we are in a virtual semester, that there are opportunities for the board members to remain engaged and participate. There was the new teacher orientation where the superintendent and staff welcomed almost 600 new educators and other support staff in the virtual version of the new educator orientation. There was also the administrator and supervisory meeting that we were able to attend and take part in. There was also an invitation by the Maryland State Fair and Agricultural Society for Dr. Williams and the board members to see the one part of the fair that was able to continue, which is the youth livestock competitions and shows. And that was a wonderful opportunity for the students to remain engaged in work that they've been doing all year. And we do appreciate, again, our community partners and the county government in enabling those opportunities to continue. We also had Rod McMillian, our board member, and Miss Lisa Mack attend the Education Foundation's Exchangery, where they support teachers with material needs. There is also the CCAC meeting, our Special Education Citizens Advisory Council meeting that I was able to attend virtually. There was also a town hall related to broadband that was put on by Delegate Michelle Guyton. And I know that many board members have participated virtually in many aspects of education and community for support. So I would just like to say that I look forward to the update on virtual learning and all of the work that continues. And that is the end of my report. And now we move on to the student member of the board.
Good evening, Chair Causey, Superintendent Williams, board members, and Team BCPS. Since my last report, I have continued to meet with student leaders from Baltimore County Student Councils, BCSC, and around the county. I've met with families and teachers to answer questions on the fall reopening plan, solicit concerns/feedback, and to speak on the work that I, this board, and the administration have been doing during this pandemic to address many of the challenges that were presented. Since the spring, BCSC has continued to meet in order to plan events that will keep our students engaged through workshops, and also to restructure the council's executive board, which had to be reshaped so that we can adhere to the virtual meeting requirements. The interim officers and the executive board, led by Sam, will hold their first meeting later this month. Secondly, BCSC plans to host an event on the 23rd of September that will be open to all students, not just student council, titled PIVOT, which the acronym stands for Positive, Informative, Virtual Organizational Tips. And the event will incorporate a number of workshops geared to give students tips on how to stay engaged during digital learning. We can't wait to see students, and we are happy to have the guest appearance of the superintendent to kick it off. For those students that want to attend PIVOT, please speak with school staff, preferably your SGA advisors or administrators, to sign up. Sam and I will also host an Instagram Live tomorrow to recap the first week of school. One of our community superintendents will also be there to help answer some of the important questions. The live will begin at 4 p.m. on the Team BCPS Instagram page. The last couple of weeks, I also had the opportunity to attend various panel discussions and rallies hosted by our students and community members on topics ranging from the fall reopening, education equity, youth activism, and etc. I thank some of my fellow board members, Ms. Scott and Ms. Pasteur, and other staff members for joining me on some of these community discussions. Lastly, I want to thank our teachers and everyone in every employee in the school system for their hard work, for the hard work they put into the reopening of the fall semester. Our students are grateful for their arduous commitment to give all students the best educational experience. Although much of the issues from the emergency closure this spring were addressed, many students, parents, and teachers continue to communicate new issues that were presented last week. These issues range from connectivity issues, access to working devices, class schedules, and transparency and adequate communication regarding announcements in individual schools and from the county. As I continue to hear these concerns, I will continue to appraise the superintendent and the board with the hopes that we can work together to, one, understand the issues, and two, find tangible solutions. The success of the fall semester and the potential in-person reopening will require the best from all of us. We have to listen and understand, and most importantly, support one another. Henry Ford said it best: coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is J, new business, action taken in closed session. And for that, I call on Mr. Brusades.
Good evening. In closed session earlier this evening, the board made a determination regarding whether to waive the appeal deadline for a specific matter brought under Section 4205 of the Education article. Now would be an appropriate time to confirm that action and vote.
Board members, may I have a motion to accept the action taken in closed session?
So moved, Matt. Second, Hen.
Thank you. Any discussion? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Dr. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Ms. Pasteur?
Yes.
Mr. Offerman?
Yes.
Mr. Mahumza?
Yes.
Ms. Henn?
Yes.
Ms. Causey?
Yes.
Ms. Jost?
Yes.
Mr. McMillian?
Yes.
Ms. Mack?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Rowe?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The motion carries. The next item on the agenda is item K, report on summer learning. And for that, we ask Dr. McComas to present.
So before Dr. McComas, before she starts, I do want to acknowledge our teachers, our administrators, our staff, our central office staff, and our communities. These next two topics, actually next three topics, summer learning, virtual learning, and equity. These reports and updates, I will say, had it not been for our school-based staff and central office staff working together, problem solving, I am so pleased that we are moving in the right direction in spite of the challenges that we're facing across Baltimore County Public Schools with this health pandemic. So I just wanted to acknowledge those at the school level and those in central office working with our partners in Baltimore County to really try to continue that continuity of learning in spite of these challenges. So with that, I want to turn it over to Dr. Mary McComas.
Good evening, and thank you, Dr. Williams. So good evening, Dr. Williams and Chair Causey and members of the board. I'm Mary McComas, our Chief Academic Officer, and I'm joined this evening by Ms. Christina Byers, our Community Superintendent of the Central Zone, Dr. Raquel Jones, our Community Superintendent of the West Zone, and Dr. George Roberts, Community Superintendent of our East Zone. And we're here this evening to share with you a report on our summer learning programs, as Dr. Williams gave us a lead in. Thank you. Next slide, please. As you know, BCPS has launched our new strategic plan, the Compass, Our Pathway to Excellence, which has established our 5 focus areas, as you see on the screen before you. Our summer learning programs rest within the learning accountability and results focus area number 1. Next slide, please. Focus area number 1, learning accountability and results, addresses the core work of our system, our school system. Our summer learning programs are a direct function of our academic programs and supports for all students, gifted, ESOL, special education, and all students within the organization. Thank you. Next slide. It's important to take a moment to recognize and understand that we had this summer a very unique situation. We had a decision to make in light of safety related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So as of June 30th, I asked that everybody take a moment to recognize that the county positivity rate at that time was 5.665%. And the number of COVID cases within the county were 7,985 cases. Therefore, at that time, we made the decision to run our summer programs virtual, always with the idea of the situation will evolve and we need to be ready to respond to a changing situation. Thank you. Next slide. As you can see on the slide, we have never stopped serving students since the emergency closure in March of 2020. Our summer programs have created for us a continuum of service that bridged last school year through a multi-tiered system of supports comprised of our traditional programs, as well as 2 new programs this summer really aimed at layering in additional supports to students who need them. Throughout this program, I'll be talking to you, as well as my colleagues, on the different aspects of the many programs offered as part of this continuum. Next slide, please. Thank you. Our traditional targeted programs that we run every summer serve as a second-tier system of intervention, if you will. They are very specific programs that target specific intervention needs, our service groups for our students. Our traditional programs include our extended year learning program, a program for English of speakers of other languages, an extended year program servicing students with disabilities, a Title I extended learning opportunity. This year, in addition, we offered a Tier 1 or universal support referred to as our summer learning hike. And then ultimately, we even offered a more intense intervention and resource in our school re-engagement program that our community soups will share with you. Next slide, please. Thank you. I will begin by walking us through the series of traditional programs that we offer every year and that we continue to offer this year, but in a virtual format. First, I'd like to begin with our extended year learning program for our secondary students. So this is a program geared for students in grades 6 to 12. And this program really targets students who are performing below grade level in reading or mathematics. These students had the opportunity to participate in 20 days of instruction that were designed to prepare students to build on their success from last year, to bridge that success very specifically on their skill set as they move into this fall. Students participated in 4 hours of virtual instruction each day, and that comprised both synchronous and asynchronous. Each day consisted of a 2-hour reading block, a 2-hour math block, and each were infused with social and emotional learning activities to encourage community building and participation. Our content offices designed customized tutorials with the Apex platform to address the most critical skills to support students being successful. And teachers were able to use the data available in those tutorials to determine and service small groups. At the high school level, students worked to recover credit and to accelerate credit through self-paced blended learning courses. As a result, our high school students were able to complete a total of 393 courses, earning 256 credits. And students who any student who needed more time to complete a credit, will have the ability to continue that in this school year through their school-based Spark program or through our extended day learning program that runs throughout the school year. In total, I'm pleased to say that 6,818 secondary students out of our 58,000 secondary students participate. That's approximately 12% of students in grades 6 to 12 participate in this program this summer. Next slide, please. Ultimately, one of our greatest celebrations that comes out of our extended year learning program is, of course, summer graduations. And we are pleased to say that an additional 48 students were able to graduate this August in a virtual format, of course, but really as a direct function of their hard work and perseverance using our extended year learning program. So thank you. Next slide, please. On the slide before you, what you have here are some testimonials from teachers and principals around the benefit that students gain from the extended year learning program. Principal Santos really speaks to how students are able to acquire credits and really advantage themselves by taking advantage of that summer window. So thank you. Next slide, please. The next 3 slides, I will share with you our ESOL program that we offer. Now, it's important to understand for everyone, if I may just take a moment, for students who are English learners, one of the key works that we do with them is to help them to acquire English language, right? English language acquisition. And so their proficiency is based on a scale of 1 to 5. These programs, for the summer are really targeting those students who are at English level 1 and 2 proficiency. So if you will, these are students who are really striving to acquire English proficiency. And so I just wanted to make sure I took a moment to sort of explain who these programs are really supporting. I'm pleased to say that this summer, our ESOL programs across the grade bands really served 682 students out of a potential 4,246 in levels 1 and 2, and that's approximately 16% of our English learners in levels 1 and 2. At the high school level, what you see here before you is that the program primarily was designed to enhance English language acquisition, as I mentioned, while simultaneously developing academic skills paired with social and emotional support. And so the ESOL office worked to develop curriculum based on our ESOL newcomer course, and it was the integration of individualized vocabulary development that was really new and critical this year. The English language development is a component of this program as required by our Title III compliance guidelines. Students receive an original health credit, or they have the opportunity to do a credit in economics and public issues. These often are courses that will help students towards meeting graduation requirements, as they are challenges often for English learners. Additionally, these students benefit from Soccer Without Borders, which provided a virtual social emotional learning component for our students through team building, social development, and English language skill development. Students also learn soccer skills in a virtual setting with their coach, just as many students these days are doing coaching virtually. The virtual therapeutic art program was also offered to enhance student choice, the program options, additionally providing social emotional development. Building artistic skills and arts appreciation and nurturing environment provides students with many coping mechanisms and engaging opportunities. Next slide, please. Likewise, our virtual middle school ESOL program is also designed for English learners in levels 1 and 2. And it's also paired with developing their academic skills and layering in social and emotional support. We had over 120 middle school students participate, we're pleased to say. Students received daily English language development instruction. They had the integration of individualized vocabulary development. And likewise, they also had an arts integration opportunity built into their schedule to provide social and emotional learning. Students' final projects were presentations highlighting their immigration stories. Very compelling. Next slide, please. Lastly, our ESOL elementary program continued to serve students from schools with the largest number of English learners at the intermediate grades. As a result, all rising grade 4 to grade 6 level 1 and 2 students were invited, resulting in over 250 students participating. This year, new digital vocabulary tools were integrated into the curriculum to make the curriculum more accessible to our English learners at levels 1 and 2 and to support teachers. The tools will additionally provide teachers with feedback for the beginning of this fall semester. Next slide, please. Our extended school year program is also one of our traditional offerings. The ESY program was provided to over 3,793 students with disabilities, servicing approximately 24.5% of our students with disabilities this summer. ESY services refer to special education and/or related services provided beyond the normal school year for the purposes of providing a free, appropriate, and public education to a student with a disability. ESY is a required part of Individuals with Disabilities Act and is provided in accordance with the Student's Individualized Education Program, or IEP. ESY is not intended to introduce new skills, but rather ESY may support the student's needs to prevent regression as a result of the extended break during summertime and its impact on a student with disabilities. Students qualify for ESY through the annual IEP team process based upon criteria identified in IDEA. When students are recommended for ESY services, the IEP team identifies those IEP goals that will be addressed during the extended year opportunity. As part of this, early childhood services consisted of our youngest learners who have not yet entered kindergarten. Teachers and staff work directly with the parents and families to support their child's development. And during the summer of 2020, opportunities for social engagement, academic readiness groups, and activities to expand the understanding of language, literacy, and mathematics were coordinated. For our elementary students participating in ESY, they were provided with direct instruction in small groups and or individualized sessions in order to maintain skills. Elementary students engaged with teachers and peers virtually as they were offered support in reading, written language, and or math, in addition to other select individualized goals. And specific intervention programs were also utilized. Lastly, our secondary students participating in ESY were provided with instruction virtually, and some were actually able to meet some of their goals through the extended year learning program opportunities. These students received instruction with groups and or individualized sessions. And as they continue to develop skills and strategies needed to maintain their skills to prepare for the school year. Related service providers conducted virtual small group and or individualized sessions with students as well. Could I have the next slide, please? Our final traditional summer program is our Extended Learning Opportunity, or ELO. The Office of Title I ELO program provide an enrichment opportunity for 6,818 Title I elementary students, servicing approximately 29% of our Title I elementary students. Program design features include a small group instruction opportunity for students exiting grades 1 through 5 in the areas of STEM infused with reading and math. The STEM lessons focus on the engineering process and science terminology using grade level reading selections. Students then use their learning to participate in a virtual build day. Materials were sent to students' homes for synchronous instruction and application of STEM-based projects. Students were able to work along with the teachers to build and test engineering projects such as straw structures, wiggle bots, flying machines, and monster mouth. Finally, students unpacked what they learned through the project build and through reading and writing about their experience. Math instruction focused on real-world problem solving using math games and reading selections. Students were able to play games virtually with teachers, classmates, and with their parents and family members. Tutoring was also offered to students in groups of 1 to 2 at least once a week, focused on notes and observations of the teachers throughout the lessons. All summer learning activities and accomplishments were shared during each school's culminating showcase. Additional tutoring supports were provided to students receiving ESOL services, and individualized counseling supports were available to families upon request. Next slide, please. Thank you. On the screen before you, you will see student participation for our traditional programs by student group. And you'll notice that student group fluctuates based on the type of intervention or the targeted purpose of the various programs. Thank you. Next slide. Next, I will take some time and share with you more about our new Tier 1 or universal support, referred to as our summer learning hike. Next slide. The participation in our summer learning hike was optional and available to all students to provide a bridge from last school year to this school year. Specifically, the hike provides students with an opportunity to review reading and math skills in order to begin their school year better prepared this September. The summer learning hike began with introductory lessons during the last week of school in June and formally was launched on Monday, June 22nd and ran for 10 weeks through to Friday, August 28th. The digital resources in the summer learning hike were student-directed and self-paced. All digital resources were translated into multiple languages and had read-aloud options to support. If students had questions or needed support, additionally, BCPS established a teacher tutoring resource that was available Monday through Fridays to help and support students. Over the 10 weeks, more than 52,000 BCPS students participated, equating to approximately 45% of our students accessing the summer learning hike opportunity at some point throughout the summer. And on average, we had 12,000 students accessing the summer learning hike each week throughout the summer. The programs were available, as I mentioned, in multiple languages. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Here you can see the student group participation in our summer learning hike. And could I have the next slide? On the screen before you is a testimonial from a teacher who really spoke to the benefit of the summer learning hike for students. Now I will turn our presentation over to my colleague, Ms. Christina Byers.
Okay, thank you, Dr. McComas. If you could please advance to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. So Dr. Roberts, Dr. Jones, and I are going to take some time to talk about another new program in this recovery continuum, and that is our re-engagement program. Next slide, please. So as we all know, COVID-19 is disproportionately impacting our communities by race and by geography. Over the course of this virus, we have seen some communities suffer through higher rates of positive tests and illness than other communities. During our continuity of learning plan in the spring, our students were impacted in different ways due to the pandemic, and those differences did impact levels of engagement. Our schools worked weekly to monitor the engagement of our students so that we could ensure that they remained connected to their school communities. As you can see from the map on this screen, COVID-19 has impacted the western and southeastern areas of our county and the Parkville area at disproportionate rates. Next slide, please. The data on this slide shows that in the aggregate, we had very high levels of engagement during our continuity of learning in the spring. During that time, we defined student engagement as a student and/or family member had contact with a staff member, a student logged into Schoology or a Google Meet, or the student or a family member requested or submitted work during the week. Over the course of the months of continuity of learning, our overall average for engagement was 96.22% at the elementary level and 96.21% at the secondary level. We saw the greatest percentage of disengagement during the week of June 15th through June 19th. And we saw the most engagement during the week of May 18th to May 22nd. Next slide, please. While we had great levels of engagement in the aggregate, we did see different levels of engagement by student group. If we take a look at the trend data for disengagement across all of our schools during continuity of learning, we notice that on average, 3,631 students were disengaged. Of that, 46% were Black, 24% white, 20% Hispanic, 6% 2 or more races, 3% Asian, and 1% American Indian. When we look at the students who are disengaged across all schools by our service groups, we find that 15% of our disengaged students receive special education services, and 15% of our disengaged students receive English language services, while 70% did not. So from our collection and our monitoring of engagement data over the course of the spring, it was clear that we would need to re-engage students prior to the start of this school year. At this time, I will turn things over to Dr. Roberts.
Great, thank you, Mrs. Byers. So in addition to tracking engagement data, we looked at the research regarding the need to re-engage our students as a means of keeping them connected to school. Roomberger and Lynn reviewed 25 years of research, and based on the synthesis of the data, the authors found that there were 2 types of characteristics that describe the reasons students drop out of school: institutional and individual characteristics. These further include family, school, and community characteristics. So in their work, Why Students Drop Out of School, a review of 25 years of research in October of 2008, they learned that a lack of relationships and connectedness were contributing factors as well. As you can see from this slide, from a series of interviews with students who had been out of school, they learned that in many instances, environment is a contributing factor to disengagement. So next slide, please. Unlike a summer program, the purpose of re-engagement was not to provide explicit instruction, but rather to reconnect our students to their school community prior to the start of the school year. Research tells us that the longer students are connected to their school community, the greater the risk that they could stay disconnected and potentially drop out. Our plan to re-engage students aligns with our strategic plan, Focus Area 1, Learning, Accountability, and Results, Focus Area 2, Safe and Supportive Environment, and Focus Area 4, Community Engagement and Partnerships. As a result, schools were charged with examining ways that they could use their data to begin the process of reconnecting their students to their school communities. They were given the following questions, which you can see on the screen, to guide their thinking around designing a re-engagement program. Next slide, please. After reviewing the data, schools worked collaboratively with our office to design a re-engagement program that would meet their unique school communities and documented their plans. Given a budgeted allocation, school leaders worked with their leadership teams to consider ways to reach out to their students and provide opportunities to re-engage them and their families into the school communities. Additionally, schools had an opportunity to use the CARES Act tutoring funds to design a program that could provide students with the academic support needed during the transitional months back into the school year. Next slide, please. Schools had an opportunity to look at 3 different ways of re-engaging their students. The first was through contact with a trusted adult. For example, a trusted adult would call and make connections and provide an information exchange. Virtual family meetings to review schedule and exchange updated contact information. Additionally, schools had the opportunity to look at individualized or small group or socio-emotional support. Examples included individualized virtual tutoring based on the needs of the students, mindfulness activities and exercises for families, meeting with school support staff and new entrants, or meeting with interpreters to enhance communication with non-English speaking families. So at this time, Dr. Jones will provide additional information regarding our re-engagement efforts. Dr. Jones?
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. Through a partnership with the Education Foundation of Baltimore County Public Schools, our schools had an opportunity to go out into their communities and/or host small groups of students at their schools using all social distancing and mitigation strategies. Various outdoors and virtual activities and events such as BCPS Connect tours came to the community in terms of families reaching out to our schools and schools being able to connect with families to deliver BCPS Connect kits, COVID-19 safety kits, supplies, and other items to families. Schools also connected with families to provide technological resources and supports to make sure that our students were geared up for online learning. An outdoor books and a blanket event has occurred, and also literary opportunities were provided using texts that address social emotional learning, inclusivity, COVID-19, or race relations with guest readers such as the principal, new teachers, mascots, and other fun things for students. Next slide, please. So the results of our re-engagement efforts. Re-engagement efforts are ongoing into the fall, and our instructional leadership teams will be working alongside our principals and our Division of School Support and Achievement to really think about the following outcomes data and what it actually lent itself to in terms of engagement. Based on the data and based on the analysis of 97 programs that were completed by August 25th, these data were comprised of 62% elementary schools and 38% of secondary schools. 3,507 students were re-engaged as a result of these efforts. 1,338 students at the elementary level and 1,719 students at the secondary level. Next slide, please. Programs had 3 primary areas of focus to reconnect students in preparation for learning. And you can see that on your screen. Technology, trusted adult, and academic support. Analysis of the outcomes reported indicated 25% of efforts focused on academic support in August and will continue again throughout the first semester. 27% targeted technology needs, including devices, training, and Wi-Fi access. 48% of our programs ensure that students and families connected with a trusted adult to further build a sense of community, as well as provide social emotional learning or support. We are very proud of our re-engagement efforts and our 2020 summer programs this school year, and we look forward to continued re-engagement with our students. Next slide, please. At this time, we want to thank you for your attentiveness during our presentation, and we will turn it over to Dr. Williams, our superintendent.
So thank you all for just giving this report on our summer learning. We are positioned now to move to the second topic on virtual learning, but I want to just pause a minute for Madam Causey if she has any comments.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. So I did just want to appreciate all the work that went into the planning, executing, and also on this reporting of the summer engagement. As Dr. McComas mentioned, the work has not stopped since March in the state of the emergency. If we were going to have opportunity for board members to make brief comments related to this important issue, and then also for the virtual learning. So at this time, I would ask board members, and I'm just going to go around the dais, to make a comment or ask a question, understanding that questions, the answers may need to be provided at a later time. So Dr. Hager?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for that great presentation. I'm particularly interested in the re-engagement and the universal approach to the summer learning hike because they were new this year. And so I know you, summer just ended a few weeks ago. So what is your plan to follow up on the data for this year to see if those children who were engaged over the summer, are they doing better this year? Can you talk more about your plan to look at additional data to support whether we should invest in this next year?
So, hi, good evening, Dr. Hager, Mary McComas. Traditional programs work to monitor what are those long-term impacts, and we will do the same with the summer learning hike. As we indicate, the summer learning hike was really geared towards creating that bridge, right, so that students had continuous practice and engagement. So it was less about introducing new standards of performance and more really about preventing the traditional summer learning loss. Just in the old school days when we were kids might have a work booklet that they're working through. And so we'll continue to look at how summer learning program, especially the new universal one, indicates, does in fact it provide buoyancy for our students to prevent regression. Thank you.
And hi, good evening. And I would just add that we will, re-engagement was really specifically related to the pandemic in that we used our engagement data from the spring from continuity of learning in order to identify how those programs would be designed. That was the way our school leaders went about designing their individual programs. We wanted them to be able to meet the unique needs of their community. And so one of the things that we can look at is how are those students progressing through the first quarter in terms of being reacclimated into the school setting. But I also want to add that, as Dr. Jones indicated, some of our schools who were using the approach of tutoring and academic support, that support is continuing through the first semester of school.
Thank you. And it is true that it was unique to the pandemic, but I mean, as you know, there are students who I'm sure would benefit from something like that again, because it sounded like a really wonderful program. So, so it sounds like there's a plan moving forward. Will those results from the additional analysis that will be done once more data is collected be presented to the curriculum committee? Is that where we would hear feedback on additional findings from this?
So yes, throughout this year, you will find we'll be presenting more updates, more disaggregated data. And so, yes, we'll be happy to provide the board an update. And it may start with the curriculum committee, or it may go to the full board. So thank you for that.
Great. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Kuhn?
No comment.
Ms. Pasteur?
Yes, thank you. I want to thank you for that report, and having looked at it at the beginning, seeing the end and looking at the data was very helpful, and how you broke it down so we could see it in various aspects. I guess I'm piggybacking on something that you've already said in answering the last question, just seeing how we're able to follow up or follow through with those young people who you managed to pull in. There were some pretty good numbers of children that you were able to engage over the summer who had disconnected. I thought it was interesting the week where you had your highest, the week where you had your lowest, and possibly why, what was happening there, and whether that, whatever was going on, what was the impact we could see in terms of engagement or lack thereof, but the why. But certainly taking a look at those children with special needs who are disenfranchised on many levels, and seeing whether they actually did better once they got involved than they were actually doing before the pandemic, or where they slipped even if they were engaged. So I think the information that you shared opens some doors, but not just how we are handling and working with our young people during this virtual mode, but as one of you just pointed out, how you will transition them back. But transitioning our children using what you learned, and maybe processing whether they really did do better when they were doing virtual, and how do we use that later on to keep them on target, or where they slipped even more. Why? Was it about the virtual? What were the things? There's so many new questions, but at least now you have some names and you have some numbers. Where do you see, can you just help me a little bit with those things that I put out? Where do you see us going in terms of supporting the young people who were involved in these programs? And again, it was wonderful that we were able to embrace more than the traditional summer programs, so we could see children in a myriad of ways. And you just help me with that.
Yeah, just real quick, I would say the innovation and creativity of our school-based staff, I will just say, just seeing the work that was being done. So it gets back to, as a former principal, Ms. Pasteur, those student support teams, the work of our counselors, the work of our PPWs, just the work of our teachers, just connecting with our young people. So I see that now looking at every school, knowing the set of kids, monitoring who's being involved, how involved are they. So I see it now at the school level, then bubbling up to us about how it's progressing. So this is causing us to look at how we just do business differently with this pandemic. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad you said that, made those last comments, because not just how we do things differently during the pandemic, but do you see, or are you starting to have discussions about how we might do things differently beyond the pandemic? What have you learned that shows you possibly a new model for how we are instructing all of our children, particularly those who have been left behind, if you will, in the past? Any new thoughts?
Well, some of the feedback was, in some cases, the technology didn't help kids, and then other cases, we heard the rhetoric that kids appreciated having their own pace. So I think the Spark, Dr. McComas spoke about the Sparks program, and it's at their own pace with the technology. So there's more that we can explore. I don't have all the answers right now, but the beauty about it, as we continue to get that feedback from the schools, that will help us to look at what we may do differently as a system.
Thank you.
Mr. Offerman?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the people who presented, but beyond that, thank all the school-based staff who did the actual, person-to-person work. I think we should all be proud of what was accomplished. That's all. Thanks.
Mr. Mahamza?
I have no comment.
Ms. Henn?
Thank you. I too want to thank staff for a great presentation. I had the chance to participate in the culminating event for Padonia for the summer STEM camp, and that was wonderful. I am anxious to hear more, so please continue to update the board on continued events throughout the year. What was especially encouraging was seeing the parent involvement with the hands-on STEM activities and getting our parents involved and the connections that they were able to make side by side with their students. And some of that is more easily facilitated in virtual learning. So as an upside, I think we have a real opportunity here to expand upon that and to expand those opportunities to all our students. So would definitely love to hear more, but thank you for the excellent presentation.
Ms. Joes?
Thank you. I'd like to thank Dr. McComas, Dr. Jones, Dr. Roberts, and Ms. Byers for the presentation, and to all of the staff that have helped. I think Ms. Best-Shore asked one of my questions, and I look forward to hearing a follow-up on this presentation as well. One of the slides, and it's just an observation, it showed that you had by race 34% of Native Americans that were engaged. And overall, we have less than 5% of Native Americans in the school system. So that to me seemed disproportionately higher. Is that accurate, or? I can tell you the slide it was on. Hang on.
I think that was me. When I broke down the, sorry, it's Ms. Byers. When I broke down the engagement data by race and by student group.
Yes, that's slide 18, correct.
Yes, it is disproportionate. You are accurate.
And am I accurate in that we have less than 5% of Native Americans in the overall school system? So to me, that was something that just stuck out right there, that it was disproportionately higher to the number of overall Native American children in the school system. So that was all And thank you.
Mr. McMillian?
Hi. I'd just like to thank everyone for all of their efforts over the summer and putting this presentation together. Thank you very much.
Ms. Mack?
Yes, I have a question about attendance, but I think it's more relevant for the virtual learning segment, so I'll hold till then. Thank you.
Ms. Scott?
Thank you for that. I don't have anything to add.
Ms. Rowe?
Hi, yes. I just want to thank staff for everything they've done this summer and for this report. And I just have one question. In the re-engagement, was there any focus? I know last year we had a focus on trying to make sure that students enroll before September 30th. Are we continuing that this year? Because I would think that in some cases we might have more obstacles to that this year, and I don't want to see us lose funding if people enroll after September 30th.
Ms. Rowe, it's still our goal to meet the September 30th enrollment timeframe. We provided information to our community superintendents about the enrollment, and we're continuing our efforts to make sure we're close, if not exceeding our projected enrollment for this school year. But yes, we still have the September 30th timeframe.
Okay, thank you.
So Dr. Williams, unless you or staff had additional comments, we can move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you. The next one is virtual learning, and we'll turn it back over to staff.
So good evening again. Likewise, I am joined for this presentation by our community superintendents, in addition to Dr. Brian Scriven, our Chief Administrative and Operations Officer, as Ms. Sandra Reed, our proud principal of high school. So we'll continue on our learning journey this evening as we start to talk about as we leave from summer and move into the school year. Thank you, Mr. Corns. We know that we are, as we have recognized often, in unprecedented times, and that we are launching a new school year leveraging technology to provide a virtual learning school year. And that you may be wondering how this fall will be different from last spring's emergency closure experience, and that you would like to be confident that our students will experience increased instruction with our teachers and have greater overall access to resources. And so we will share with you steps that we have taken to launch our new school year in that direction. So next slide, please. First and foremost, I'll begin by sharing some of our curricular highlights. So throughout the summer, our curriculum offices worked nonstop, really from March, but certainly throughout the summer, to revise our scope and sequences for each course to ensure that units of instruction are adjusted to account for the needs of our students and the need to accelerate and infuse unfinished learning from last spring with current grade level standards as they move on to a new grade. Another critical part of our work this summer has been the development of diagnostic tasks. Now, these tasks have been specifically designed and embedded in our courses to provide students and teachers the resources needed to identify starting performance levels of skills and knowledge, thereby providing teachers, students, and families real-time instructional data so that they have a sense of where our students are so that we can hit that critical path to keep them moving forward. Our approach is anchored in the research and the publication from the New Teacher Project, specifically their publication, the Learning Acceleration Guide. And this was discussed in our August Curriculum Committee, so anyone's welcome to go back and view that discussion. If I could have our next slide, please. Additionally, many families of students with neurodiversity and unique and complex learning needs would like to understand how services will be provided this fall. And so first and foremost, we have structured our school day to expand and increase direct teacher access and increase the opportunity for this brings expanded structure and coordination to support intervention, small group, and individualized support opportunities. We have more purposefully leveraged virtual platforms, and we have increased the number of virtual tools to support assessing student and collecting assessment data. Our paraeducators and assistants will be able to provide virtual support this semester through devices. We have expanded our opportunities for integrated and coordinated service delivery. For example, speech-language pathology, working with classroom teachers in a more coordinated and scheduled fashion. And additionally, we have worked to resolve technical barriers to support related services such as OT-PT and speech-language. And we are providing alternative supports and services to hands-on therapy. Next slide, please. Additionally, we have worked tirelessly to provide professional learning for our faculty and staff from last spring's emergency closure straight through to now. We have provided professional learning last spring to support the dramatic pivot to virtual teaching. And throughout the summer, many optional professional learning opportunities were available based, of course, on teacher expertise and area of assignment. For one example, we provide department chairs with a tailored Learning Institute opportunity for them to support them as instructional leaders moving into this year so that they can support learning accountability and results aligned with our compass. This August, our pre-service week focused on the topics you see on the screen before you, and we will continue to support our faculty, both school-based and system-wide professional learning relevant to our unfolding. I will now be followed by Dr. Scrivens with some highlights from our first week.
So good evening. So highlights from the first week of September 8th include data in the aggregate from our first day of school, as well as a first week average. In aggregate, we had 83,618 students who accessed BCPS-1, and the majority of those students were on the elementary level. Additionally, in aggregate, we had 96,598 students who accessed Schoology, and those students were primarily on the secondary level. We also had in excess of 32,000 students on average, which accessed our Google Meets and were actively engaged in that interactive opportunity. To assist to address the need of closing our 5-to-1 ratio to a 1-to-1 ratio at the elementary level, we distributed an additional 23,361 devices from the beginning of the school year, which was in addition to the 35,000 devices that we deployed over the spring. And I have to share that and give kudos just to our DOIT team and to our students who worked so diligently at Kenwood High School. They were the ones that did the heavy lifting with making sure that these devices were refreshed, functional, and ready to be deployed. From the standpoint of tech support, from August 30th to September 11th, there were more than 8,000 help desk tickets that were received. 2,000 plus of those tickets were resolved and had to deal with issues around Google Meet. We processed at the help desk just around 1,000 tickets per day are being closed on a daily basis. We definitely in the first couple of days were not as responsive as what we would have liked to have been in terms of the number of calls that were in the queue and the length of time which individuals were waiting. So subsequently, we did some cross-functional training with some of our customer service folks in the Office of Transportation. Approximately 14 were trained, and we were able to get their assistance in terms of taking calls and processing tickets effective September 10th, which was a Thursday. We were happy to see that on September 11th at 11:30, we had no calls in the queue in terms of folks being on hold. Additionally, we are using our transportation department to assist with retrieving broken devices from schools. And they are also poised to assist with the distribution of devices to schools, which has really been an ongoing process. DOIT continues to monitor call counts, hold times, ticket counts, and device requests so that we can be responsive and allocate resources appropriately. I do have to take this opportunity to just give a quick shout out to all of our school-based tech support, to our principals, administrators, to the leaders in the school, because they have been very innovative and creative with the supports that they have been giving from their perspective with supporting their respective communities. So this is not something that we have been doing in isolation. The schools have been right there with us from day one, and we will continue to press forward with making sure that devices and connectivity are available to all students. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Roberts.
Great, thank you, Dr. Scriven. Back to school planning begins the moment summer starts and throughout the summer months across BCPS. And one highlight for this year was our instructional material distributions. However, COVID and an enhanced virtual learning environment place a heightened awareness on instructional material preparedness this year. First, starting with all federal, state, and local health guidelines, principals plan instructional material pickup days for opening the 2020-2021 school year. We wanted to make sure that students had some of the items needed to engage in their virtual studies. Therefore, principals and school leaders gathered instructional materials for distribution to parents and students. Some of those items included textbooks, devices, special area supplies, and mathematics manipulatives. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our principals, our assistant principals, and teachers and all school leaders for the work that they put forward for the planning and implementation of our instructional material pickup days. In addition, the Education Foundation, led by Ms. Debbie Phelps, was also a strong partner in preparing and distributing materials to students through their school-based work and the grand opening of the newest exchangery in the Avenue at White Marsh. We are excited to get this school year underway and have materials ready to support teaching and learning for all of our students. So at this time, Dr. Jones will now provide a brief review of professional learning that all teachers and staff engaged in during pre-service week. Dr. Jones?
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. As Dr. McComas said, there were so many professional learning opportunities and preparations in place for our teachers to begin, as it states on the slide, instruction on the very first day. We know that our teachers have a huge impact on student achievement, and our investment continues to be in professional learning and supporting our teachers in meeting the needs of our students. Prior to the first week of school, teachers engaged in topics, as you can see, such as teaching and learning in an online environment. Just thinking about COVID-19 and the current context and how to meet the needs of students in a virtual environment, our CNI staff worked with our teachers to make sure that our curriculum was aligned to the Maryland College and Career Ready standards, and that the content is and was suitable for students on the very first day of school. teaching and learning from a social emotional learning standpoint, and really even thinking about what it means to support students in their executive functioning online and their ability to stay organized and to really do some great things and be engaged in the online environment. Next slide, please. There were also opportunities for students and families to participate in a variety of back-to-school events, and several of our stakeholders had opportunities to even just witness those events kind of unfold and take place. We were very excited to still offer our 6th and 9th grade articulation and transition for our students who are entering middle school and high school for the first time. We had new student orientation activities that were planned at our schools to make sure that all of our new students feel welcomed and a part of their learning environment. Our community superintendents, Dr. Roberts, Ms. Byers, and I had the amazing opportunity to participate in back-to-school community conversations where we were able to answer questions that were collected from our stakeholders and really provide some timely information just about back-to-school and what families and communities can anticipate. We also had the opportunity to participate in a bilingual community conversation with Somos Baltimore Latino on Facebook Live, and that was a very enriching opportunity to really connect with our Spanish-speaking families and talk about what back-to-school concerns they had and to actually address those concerns. Several of our schools provided parent and teacher conferences for students. Parents and teachers had the opportunity to engage in one-on-one conversations and or group conversations. And as we know, we are approaching and in the midst of our back-to-school nights, and those are still being planned for our schools. Of course, they will take place safely and virtually, but we are very excited about our back-to-school night. At this time, we're going to turn it over to Ms. Byers, and she's going to tell us more about our virtual learning.
So thank you, Dr. Jones. The combination of preparation and robust professional learning and community and student outreach really assisted our schools with implementing virtual learning the first week of school. Many have mentioned this, but I will mention it as well. The tireless efforts of our school leaders and our teachers is commendable, and it really supported a positive first week back of virtual learning. In many ways, virtual learning during the first week was similar to previous first weeks of school. So I'm going to use some examples that popped up on social media to do a little walkthrough what virtual learning looked like during our first week. Just like when we are in a face-to-face environment, our teachers spent the first week supporting and implementing social emotional learning. They held class meetings, and their lessons involved opportunities for our students to meet and get to know their classmates and their teachers. As you can see from a tweet from Principal Kelly O'Connell at Mars Estates Elementary, teachers implemented social emotional learning strategies to support our students' transition back into the classroom. In addition to supporting their well-being, our teachers also began implementing our academic program during the first week. Our students were promptly engaged in lessons that align to the standards of our courses through the revised curriculum that Dr. McComas spoke of. There's a tweet on this slide from Ms. Bree Fortcamp, the principal of Seven Oaks, and it illustrates students engaging in number corners, which many of you know is a core component of our Bridges math program. The interactive digital tools that are part of this program enabled our students to engage virtually in rigorous and critical mathematical thinking during week one. Our leaders and teachers weren't the only people prepared and working hard on the first week. Our students were ready as well. There's a tweet on this slide from Ms. Tamara Harris Murphy. She's the assistant principal at Edmondson Heights Elementary, and this just illustrates how our students were ready, focused, and engaged. So at this time, it is my honor and my pleasure to introduce one of our outstanding principals, Miss Sandra Reed. She's the principal of Pikesville High School. And tonight, Miss Reed is with us to provide you with a principal's perspective of preparing for and implementing what has been a historical first week of virtual learning. Miss Reed.
Thank you, Ms. Byers, and good evening, Chairwoman Causey, Vice Chairwoman Henn, Dr. Williams, and members of the board. I'm honored to share with you this evening candidly and from the perspective of a proud 12-year veteran principal of Team BCPS. For me, without fail, these moments leading up to a happy school new year has always been filled with eager anticipation and sheer excitement to bring into fruition the dreams and goals and hopes that I have for my students, staff, and school. This year, however, I will say that I felt the difference and the toll the past 6 months have had on my leadership. This year's historic and fully virtual opening was compounded by the implications and nuances to be navigated due to the still raging pandemic that has changed how we approach most aspects of our work as educators. At first, such an opening in my career, I felt as if I was a brand new administrator, caring, excited to meet the new challenge, but unsettled and anxious for what seemed like a daunting task. Initially, I was consumed with questions, thoughts, concerns that occupied my mind as we prepared to embark on this never-before undertaking. How can I make the adjustment to this new educational paradigm as normal as possible based on our previous and traditional service to students? What will we adopt and utilize that was successful in the spring emergency closure to allow for a more productive and fruitful remote learning this semester? Will we be able to sustain the engagement and robust instructional programming to which we have worked diligently at Pikesville High to achieve over the years? I had questions and knew that our stakeholders had varying opinions and issues related to what was occurring in this unprecedented time. Unfortunately, many were facing economic turmoil, health ramifications, and experiencing emotional unrest. Our school is indeed a microcosm of the true reflection of the world. We're at the front line of all that's transpiring in it, and we naturally absorb some of the good and not so good national and worldwide concerns that exist, and that can and do distract our students during impressionable years. This year, we had to be more focused than ever, keeping our goals streamlined and feasible so that we could benefit from processing. We had to make certain that we had one common and enduring aim, and that was to be the most successful year, regardless of the platform utilized. Whether fully digital, traditional face-to-face, or hybrid, we aim to exceed all expectations. Never forgetting our all-important why, the tangible achievement of every single one of our students, we developed a plan of action to provide a clear roadmap of where we were headed together in our journey and how to foresee and thoughtfully plan to mitigate any detours that would take us off our course. We were fortunate to have been given the option to choose a schedule we felt would best service our students. We built in accountability for staff and students to promote a high-quality teaching and learning with necessary supports and interventions for all. We have been explicit and consistent with our virtual expectations. We encourage academic scaffolding and an emphasis on lifelong skills, including writing, expression, reading, organizational, critical thinking, innovative tech school, and also a customized and personalized learning experience for students in need or desirous of additional acceleration of skills. A sizable cadre of our faculty took advantage of well-received and intensive learning offered by BCPS's organizational development this summer. 2 of our master professional development teachers led the charge for our staff members, many of whom expressed how helpful it was in addressing virtual pedagogy questions, as well as promoting creativity and more student-centered opportunities in their planning. Throughout the past week, this week and going forward, members from the varied departments in our comprehensive high school will be consistently collaborating during times designated for them in our master schedule. During these opportune times, they will learn from each other, share ideas, effective practices, and engage in data analysis to inform instruction and ascertain our movement to realizing our SVP goals and SLOs as metrics for growth. Beginning this summer, we had extensive meetings with our leadership and staff of the importance of infusing SEL, social and emotional learning opportunities, in every single class. This is so that we could build a community of learners who felt cared for, connected to the curriculum and their peers, as well as able to readily contribute in meaningful ways during class sessions. PHS's focus this year on self is rooted in celebrating our diverse learning community and servicing it with an equity lens. Of support, our staff is replete with school counselors, special educators, our SEL teachers, our school psychologists and school social workers were all set and served in unison in a coordinated fashion to cultivate emotionally healthy learning environments for our most vulnerable students. We've activated our equity task force, made up of faculty and staff from all backgrounds, to spur us in being a more inclusive and inviting school that earnestly values and embraces the various cultures that we represent. Earlier this summer, we had 2 concurrent book studies in full operation as we prepare to widen our scope this year. And tomorrow, we begin our first school-wide book, Courageous Conversations About Race, to ponder, express, and interrogate practices for the betterment of all stakeholders, especially those who are marginalized and discounted. We offered, and throughout the year, will continue our Chat and Choose forum for those students who are disconnected. In so doing, we provided a user-friendly platform for them to learn, to study computer, academic, and social skills for the upcoming year. Recognizing that communication is indeed key, our weekly Monday Panther letter is a unifying source of information for our staff to follow to ensure that we are abreast and operating with a common mission, purpose, and understanding. To ensure that our parents, our important partners, were kept in the loop, we indeed, during a recent live stream back to school night, I was able to share the myriad of ways that we strive to keep them informed. Weekly, via messengers and email blasts, monthly, via our Panther newsletter, and quarterly through our virtual Purposeful Panther Parent Forum to gain alliance and connection to our important work of educating their child. We've already begun the process of sending positive referrals, highlighting and edifying students to their family members about the wonderful ways where they are assessing and capitalizing on the learning communities provided at Pikesville High. So as we began our journey to this opening, we are thrilled to be fully staffed, supported by our community superintendent and executive directors. Our school-related materials have been distributed to students with the help of the Education Foundation. Our faculty received their work from home, PHS goodie bags, and they have signed up to work in the building when appropriate and to utilize equipment needed to effectively deliver instructional programming from home if necessary. Our device distribution, et cetera, has been completed as well, and for the most part, with few exceptions for new enrollments. Our freshmen, they received a comprehensive and thoroughly devised orientation from all administrators, and we're eager to meet them as well tomorrow morning for our first freshman town meeting. We have caring staff leading new to PHS clubs and organizations that cater to our students, such as our male mentoring program and ladies forum. We're excited to initiate a highly anticipated Panther podcast and virtual athletic training and a myriad of other activities that stimulate students' interests and talents outside of the classroom and ensure positive student contribution to our total school program, even while virtual. I know that I speak on behalf of my BCPS principal and administrative colleagues who have worked so arduously to ensure successful outcomes for all under our charge. Using our collective IQ, we are ready to begin to forge educational pathways with some old, some new, some borrowed, and some true blue methods, all to keep pace with the dynamic educational environment we've entered. What remains constant for all of us is our unwavering commitment, dedication, and resolve that our most treasured, our BCPS students and future leaders are properly cared for, nurtured, and equipped with the skills and habits of mind to be productive and influential citizens who make us proud. Thank you. And at this time, we'll view a video that highlights BCPS's Back to School.
Welcome back, Team BCPS. The school year kicked off with distribution of materials and devices. Then, on the first day of school, our students and staff were camera ready. The first week of school for Team BCPS had its typical start.
Good morning, Miss Morton. Good morning, first graders.
But instead of students being in the classroom with their teachers,
being laughed at or feeling invisible,
they now have a screen that separates them. This may be a new way for now, but our staff and students will succeed.
I'm adjusting to virtual learning by having a clean workspace every day, so I'm ready to do my best in school.
Last year compared to this year, I feel like teachers and staff are a little bit more on board with the learning and education experiences now that we are going through the pandemic.
This school year I'm excited about meeting my teacher, seeing my friends, and learning lots of new things.
Students entered their virtual classrooms full of excitement, as well as the teachers. Classroom routines and expectations were reviewed, and students were highly engaged throughout their Google Meet sessions.
And the superintendent wanted to check in on some students to see how they are adjusting.
The fourth day of a new school year,
there's no
and it's so
volume.
exciting to see your faces and the work that you're doing. I just want to commend our principal, especially Principal McBride and your leadership, and Dr. Jones' leadership, getting everything ready. And Ms. Piper, I was in earlier, and I was so impressed with your enthusiasm.
I mentioned this icebreaker a little earlier.
One thing I like about being a teacher is that each day brings its own unique set of challenges. It really keeps you on your toes. And this new environment definitely brings a lot of challenges. But the hard work I've been seeing from both my coworkers, my fellow teachers, and the students has been really inspirational. They're really determined to confront all of these challenges head on. And I'm so lucky to be part of such an awesome community of teachers who have been working their butts off every day simply because they care about making sure these kids do well.
I know starting off the school year virtually is not something that we hoped for. However, it's something that's necessary to keep us all safe and healthy. This being my senior year, I want to make the best of it. That's why I'm going to focus on these three things: staying organized with my work, reaching out to my teachers for help, and taking care of my mental health.
It's our job as educators to be together in this, and everybody in this community be together. And I just believe in everybody maintaining that focus. And one way to do that is through thoroughly entertaining your students in the classroom. That's what I plan to do. I'm going to be as entertaining and as thoughtful and as caring as possible. And I think if we do those things, we'll succeed during these tough times.
Ms. Causey, I will turn it back over to you. And just an update, we do have Mr. Burke and Dr. Lisa prepared to give a overview and presentation on equity.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Williams. And thank you to Principal Sandra Reed and to all of the staff that developed that update for us. It's truly inspirational. And And at this point, I would offer the board members a moment for comment or question. And again, we'll go around the dais. So we'll start this time with Ms. Rowe.
Hi, yes, I just have one question. I'm not sure, maybe this data isn't available, but do we know how many students who are enrolled have not yet logged in or attend classes or engaged in any way?
Dr. Scriven or Dr. McComas?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Williams. Hi, thank you for that question. So we are in the process of monitoring over our Schoology account, and through Schoology, I know Dr. Scriven shared on the one slide the number of students who logged in. And so I think your question is really like in the inverse, and I don't have that number on tip of my fingertips, but we have been monitoring the logins accessing the curriculum, in addition to, I believe, as well. So thank you.
Okay, so what are we doing? Do we have a plan for how to engage students who haven't logged in yet? Or is there, I guess, strategy for reaching out to them?
Yes, and I see Ms. Byers is about to come, and I'll just add before I shift over. Ms. Rowe, thank you for that question, because we are approximating a normal school year, and so every school always has an attendance committee that helps monitor and identify outreach. So I'll hand it over to my colleague right now, who I know is ready to share that.
No, I can echo what you said. That is monitored at the individual school level by a school-based leadership team. And so all of our schools have processes for how teachers keep track of students who are engaging, students who are present in class meetings, students who are activating Schoology and turning in work. And then they utilize those processes and structures within their schools to implement tiered levels of intervention for students. And so just like if we were in a brick and mortar or a face-to-face environment, schools are prepared to intervene in the same way.
Okay, thank you for that.
Ms. Scott?
Yes, I didn't have my hand raised, but did you have a question for me?
No, this is just an opportunity. We're going around the dais for board members if they have a comment or a question related to the presentation.
Oh, I do not. Thank you.
Ms. Mack?
Yes, I have a question. First of all, thank you all very much for the presentation. I don't know to whom I should address this, but I'm curious about attendance at the elementary school level, how that is being measured.
So are you asking?
Yes, hi.
Go ahead, Mary.
Oh, I may be asking the same thing you are, Ms. Byers. So, Ms. Mack, the teacher's taking attendance. So if a child, just as you would in normal elementary school, in brick and mortar, when they come, they're marked attendant in the morning. And because our elementary students are primarily with an individual teacher as opposed to secondary teachers, it's not a class by class, like period by period attendance. However, if they do attend any of the sessions, they are recorded. So, Ms. Byers, I don't know if you have any greater clarification.
Yes, a number of teachers shared with me some information that was provided to them that as long as a student checked in for 5 minutes, the student would be marked present. And of course, I have a concern about that because that's not helping a elementary school student read. It's not helping them learn math. And it was my understanding that at the elementary school level, attendance was being taken at the end of the day so that if the child only showed up, let's say, in a special, the child would still be marked present. And I'm hoping that's incorrect. That's why I'm asking for clarification.
So Ms. Mack, our guidance has been to, if a student is able to participate, that we certainly acknowledge their attendance. If we have a student, we have a student who is attending just partially, that would then trigger some of the response mechanisms that Ms. Byers spoke to. So if you have a teacher who has a student who is only partially attending, then we need to notify the school support team so that we can do the outreach to find out, to get under that and figure out what are the supports that we need to do. Because we would agree with you that 5 minutes is not the instructional time that we know students deserve and that we want them to have. And so that would really have to trigger the responses within the school around attendance and monitoring that.
But what would be reported to the board as schools turn in their attendance? Would that student who maybe showed up for half a day be counted as there, even though the student may not have had any academic subject matter that day?
So I think those are good questions, Ms. Mack. I think it's based what Ms. Reed talked about is the collective body at the local school. We can follow up with the board about these concerns that you're hearing at the elementary school level.
Thank you. And I do have one other question, and it might be my lack of understanding of the technology. I believe on one of the slides it said that 32,000 students were on Google Meets.
Yes. So Dr. Scriven,
would you delivery mechanism other than Google Meets for students to interact with their teachers?
Yes.
Ms. Mack, if I may jump in, I'm sorry, Dr. Scriven.
Go ahead, Jim.
That number that Dr. Scriven read was the number of Google Meets that were held by teachers on September 8th, not the enrollment in the Google Meets. That was almost 87,000 students that participated in those 31,000 meets that were held.
Thank you so much for that clarification. And just so that I know on a going forward basis, is there another means of delivering classroom lessons other than Google Meets? I mean, if I want to have my whole class in front of me, can I only use Google Meets, or are there other means that people are holding class sessions?
Ms. Mack, the video conferencing tool that BCPS has selected for students is Google Meet.
Okay.
And so that's the one that that all teachers have been given the most training on, and that is supported centrally.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that because I hear people talk about Schoology, but I think it's used for different things, and I just wanted to make sure. Thank you all very much.
Ms. Mack, if I may just add, think about Schoology as sort of your super trapper keeper. It's where our curriculum is housed, assignments are sent out, students keep assignments and work through. So think about Schoology as a metaphorical notebook, if you will, and then Google is the opportunity to kind of come into a virtual space.
So Google is the classroom?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank
you. Mr. McMillian?
I'd like to say again, thank you for all the hard work people are putting into these presentations. Thank you very much.
Ms. Joes?
Thank you, Dr. McComas and staff. Quick question, I think also it would answer Ms. Mack's question, since my daughter is in elementary school. They do take attendance at the beginning of this class, since I sit with her the whole time. My concern is, though, what happens if somebody logs off in the middle of the day or does not come back after their lunch break? Does that somehow get recorded? Or is that just attendance once a day? And second, I also know that there was somewhere, I think it was a report that came to the board that we had 92% attendance on the first day virtually. So given the size of the school, that's still about 8,000 to 10,000 children that have not logged on. Is that correct? Or is that number just for the first day of attendance? And well, yeah, so those are my two questions.
So Ms. Jones, I can share that 96.3% of our students have logged in over the first 4 days of school. So we certainly, as every day of school, whether it's virtual or in person, strive to do the outreach. So if you have a student that is not attending, I know we discussed earlier some of the mechanisms in schools to reach out to families to find out how we can support them in getting their students to attend and engage. And your earlier question around if you have a student and this, who logs in the morning and they're attending part of the day, but then missing some of their academic subjects, that too, again, would be a case where we need to notify the school processes or activate the school processes to do outreach to ensure that students are accessing their full academic resources and not just partial.
Thank you. And just another real quick question, maybe you can answer that. I saw that Dreambox is no longer there, but there's another program, First in Math. Is that similar to Dreambox, that software, or?
Yes, ma'am. That is a resource that is similar in that it allows supplemental mathematics support.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Ms. Henn?
Thank you. What other metrics are we currently capturing or will be capturing to evaluate the technical success of virtual learning, including both connectivity as well as our support processes and support times, things of that nature?
So I think those are good questions, Ms. Henn. Again, tonight was just an overview. We will be providing additional updates and particularly working with our State Department because Dr. Salmon is requesting information as well. So I think we can follow up with some of those questions that you just asked.
Okay, my second question has to do with our triage process and response to students, because as we all know, the stakes are higher now that we are in virtual learning, so that when a student is having trouble with a device, worst case scenario is they are completely disconnected from instruction. And if that is the case, do we have a method for them to raise the red flag and get support in such a fashion that it is more urgent, where they're able to signal us that this is urgent, they are missing instructional time, and receive support on an urgent basis?
So Jim, if you just want to explain the process for troubleshooting for students and what the next steps would be if they were in that situation.
So our current process is that we started back in March by opening up our help desk to students and teachers. That allowed individuals to put in tickets for device issues and along with any other kind of issues that they might be having. We are currently manning about 30 people on our call center. With our volume in the start of school, we have received an inordinate amount of tickets that we're working through. We are currently closing more tickets than are being opened. But Ms. N, to your point, we started our school year with a deficit of devices for one-to-one learning. So we worked very diligently to find devices to bring to bear to put in the hands of students. And so we're being very judicious with distributing them so that we can maintain the queue of devices that we have. So what we've been doing is working with our ticketing system to have devices delivered to schools so that a student can come back to their school, drop off their device that's non-functional, and swap it out with a known good device. Those devices range from Chromebook to some of our newer ProBooks to some devices that have come off lease after their 4-year life cycle.
Okay, so just to clarify, if I may, and thank you for that information, there are lots of different reasons why someone could submit a ticket, ranging from I lost the W key on my keyboard to I can't do anything. And until I get help, I'm sunk. I can't get into my classes. So what I'm trying to understand is, for those students who we really need to help immediately, is there a process where they can say, I need help immediately, and get that help that they need, so that they're not missing valuable instructional time? And how would they go about doing that? And do we have resources for them to get that help?
So Jim, I think we could talk to the process of the communication between students and the teacher, as the teacher is able to do some of that initial troubleshooting when the student lets them know that they're having difficulty while they're in the Google Meets class.
And that is correct, Dr. Scriven. We've also had most of our, I should say most, all of our schools have been working on frontline triage from a front desk standpoint, so that we've been able to work through our principals to also address students that are in immediate need for devices. We've had just a variety of communication channels to come through with, especially when it comes to our students that are in a more pressing need based on maybe accommodations that they might have, or being an English as a second language learner, where we are receiving those calls directly to my leadership team to move those devices through. So, Ms. Henn, to your point, we get many types of tickets that we work to triage. The report mechanism on that tends to be what the parent or student provides to us. So we would always ask for specificity when it comes to what's wrong. But I will say that many of our tickets do come in with "my device is broken." So that does take a follow-up call by a staff member to find out what exactly that damage might be. And so there are times when we need to call a parent or call us or reach out to a student through communication means to make sure that they get the help they need.
So the messaging then to parents to say, if we had to put a messaging out to parents right now who are listening, if your child is not able to get into their class, they have no access whatsoever, and this assumes they can't reach out because they're not in the Google Meet, they have no working device at all, it's to do what?
But they can always reach out to the school, Ms. Henn. It doesn't always have to be through Google Meets. And there's a full F&Q that we've sent out to our community at large to address any myriad of situation that may arise. And full transparency, this is continuously evolving, and we're constantly working on troubleshooting each day, every day.
Okay. And I know continuous improvement is the goal, and I commend you for the hard work that everyone's doing, and this is terrific, and I appreciate everyone's efforts. I know we're working towards this, and if there is a goal in terms of a response time, and I know Dr. Williams said he'd be getting us this information, but in an ideal situation, do you have a target goal in mind in terms of what is an acceptable downtime, in terms of if a student is unable to access their class, what would you like that response time to be? Is it 4 hours? Is it 8 hours? Is it 2 days? Where are we headed? What would that response time look like?
And I think after week 1 of gathering data and information, once we have an opportunity to truly analyze, and the same questions you're currently asking me right now are those questions that I pose to Jim Corns each and every day. So we definitely can give you and the full board a weekly update in terms of where we are as we continue to unravel and learn as we go through this process this year. So we have no problem doing that.
Great. I think the board wants to support you all in that and make sure that you have the resources that you need to be able to support our students at the highest level possible so that instruction is not interrupted. That's what my goal is anyway. So thank you for everything you're doing and the hard work of everyone. I really appreciate it. And thank you for this presentation and the update.
Thank you.
Mr. Mahamza?
Yes. Yeah, thank you to some of my board members for asking very important questions that I had on my list. I guess I can, instead of being redundant, I'll ask a couple questions. In terms of like attendance, are we continuing with like the voice call? I know we did that in previous years where like a student's absent, they get a call like at around 9. Are we continuing that?
So good evening, Josh. Yes, we are. So at the end of the day, once all attendance has been recorded and calculated, calls are going home. Right now, they're going out, I believe, around 6 p.m. at night.
Okay. Well, the reason I'm asking is like another way, like another thought could be like if we did it like in previous years where we called like around 9 or 8, like around first period. Maybe it's the principal or something, somebody that can check in if somebody's having a tech issue. Because I know some parents were saying they could not access Schoology at all or contact their teachers. So there was no way for them to communicate their issues to the teachers. So I just thought these calls, maybe the teacher could get in touch with that student before it goes on.
Thanks. That's it's a great suggestion, and we can take back a way to do that. I didn't realize you were referring to the midday calls, like mid-morning, that come out. We are not doing that right now because of the way we're taking period attendance. It is a little bit different, but you make a really good point in that if a student has missed period 1, what is our way of just checking in with that student to say, are you absent, or are you having a device issue, or having difficulty logging on? So I think that's something that we can take back and think about. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And in terms of our younger children, like elementary school children, some family members were sharing to me that when they were having issues, apparently maybe their teacher told them to type in the chat. But some were like very young children and like they're not good at spelling or could not use that chat function. What are like the guidelines for like elementary school students of like how to deal with them and their issues? Because it's definitely different from high school students.
So it is.
Yes, so thank you.
Oh. Go ahead. Nope, go ahead, Dr. McComas.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mahomes, for that question. And so, as with all things for our youngest learners, we work with them developmentally on what are the routines that they are capable of doing. And that, different teachers have different routines. If you think back to when you were a young learner, the different routines that teachers teach students and work with families that help their students develop those routines. And that would be, it could be a wide variety of techniques is what I'm saying. Is our teachers are not tone deaf to the developmental capabilities of the students they serve.
Okay, thank you. I guess my next question is towards Principal, the principal from Pikesville and Dr. Williams. In terms of extracurricular activities, are all high schools also incorporating clubs and other activities apart from athletics? Because I know athletics, we have a great plan in place. So are all schools also incorporating other activities?
So I can.
So, yeah, Josh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dr. Roberts.
Yeah, so Josh, another great question. So yes, schools will be. We're going to be passing along information to our principals very shortly so they can begin the process to engage their staff to start up, I guess what you're referring to as clubs or extracurricular activities for our kids.
Okay, and is that like kind of data documented for each schools, or do you guys just give school suggestions and they take that in? Do we document that kind of data?
So in terms of participation of students into the extracurriculars?
In terms of like the number of clubs or like the various clubs that each school presents, because like I know at Dundalk, we have a strong athletic program. But and we in previous times we had like SGAs, but clubs like speech and debate, clubs like other clubs, they were not there just because of participation of administrators, teachers. So I was just wondering, are each schools
So they do have flexibility. So there's two ways to look at that question, Josh. One is there are a few dozen activities, extracurricular activities that are established across the system that if there's a teacher who's willing or a staff member that is willing to put the time in to sponsor those activities, and really begins with students showing an interest and then a teacher to sponsor that activity. Those are well established. But if there is also a club that is not on the list, if you will, then students, if they have an interest in starting a club, the key is just finding a teacher, let's say at Dundalk High School, who's willing to sponsor it. And then that conversation goes from the teacher with the principal, and then they work out and go from there. But it really begins with interest in students. So students, if you have an interest in a club, certainly speak to your staff, speak to your teachers, and that can be talked about with the principal and move forward.
Okay. And I guess my last question has to do with the schedules. I know like people who chose the semester schedules, the schools that chose the semester schedules, and some of the concerns we're hearing. I think what everybody, most of the concerns that I was hearing, it was mainly with AP classes. And I understand that, and I understand the pros for that schedule. So I guess I want to ask this kind of, did you guys consider after this semester is finished to have like AP test prep program classes to help those students still remain engaged in that class, I guess?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Another great question. So that is something we shared, I believe Dr. Jones shared in the previous presentation, that the three of us had was part of a live event to the community to kick off the school year. So that specific question I addressed with the community. So yes, if there is a school that's offering a semesterized schedule, then what will happen for students taking AP classes is what we shared is that schools will put in place some type of review. Again, we know AP exams begin the first week of May, and they run about 2 weeks. So somewhere typically in the March to April phase, students who had AP classes the first semester, what will most likely happen is they will be put together with current students, not in a class per se during the school day, obviously, because they have their 4 other classes to take, but in review sessions that they can engage in to really gear up and prep just like the students who are taking the AP class in the second semester.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you all so much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Mr. Offerman, question or comment related to the report on virtual learning?
All my issues have already been addressed. Thank you.
Ms. Pesture?
Yes, thank you. First, I want to thank everyone for the work that you have done to get us to this point. Thank you, Ms. Reed, for your honesty and talking about, certainly you served as a model in talking about the kinds of things that were new for you in your thinking, because all of the principals were tasked to do that. This wasn't just take what we had and put it before camera. So thank you for your honesty in stating that it was not easy and your feelings about things as you started. So again, thank you. I'm wondering, Dr. Scriven, someone said in the report, or maybe it was Dr. Williams, someone talked about or mentioned our technology people in our schools. So my first question is, then do we in fact have a technology expert, if you will, in each school so that parents and children can direct questions to them?
Yes, ma'am. To answer that question, we do, or we have the support. I'm the one that mentioned that, and it was really with respect to our principals and just their leadership with galvanizing their tech savvy folks, whether they're the tech person on duty or just are well versed with tech. They've all been creative, innovative, and it's been all hands on deck. This by no means has been an easy process, and we're struggling and fighting and persevering to stay ahead of it each and every day. And that's my truth. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And I'm wondering with that, because just as you just mentioned, the folks in each school might be at some different place in terms of their technology acumen, if you will. So are you now, or do you have plans as you look at some of the issues that come up, some of the things that come up, some of the issues that have arisen, and you take a look at them and you see some similarities, and maybe drawing these people together so that everybody is on the same level? Is that something, since we don't know how long, even if we send them back, we're still going to be doing some things virtually? So this is the thing.
Well, we're working hand in hand with our community superintendents and our executive directors, which really have the ears of the schools and the challenges that they're facing. So we're constantly holding huddles to calibrate and figure out what adjustments we need to make sure that we're providing the support that's necessary. Again, it's ongoing.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Scriven, and yes, thank you for the work.
Mr. Kuhn?
Thank you. Mr. Corrins, I've got some specific questions about Google Meets that I'm hoping you can answer.
I can try.
Great. I was actually talking to a teacher this afternoon before this meeting, and she pointed out that that they're not administrators of these meetings themselves, so they don't have full control over what's happening within the meeting itself. Is there some kind of setting that you can look into to try and work on that going forward? It seems to be a challenge. The other question I have for you is they're also limited in the number of people that you can actually see in a Google Meet, I think to like 11 or maybe 15. And we know class sizes are larger than that, so teachers aren't able to see all of the children in their class. Is that working as expected, or is there a way to fix that?
So, Mr. Kuhn, let me start with the first comment about administrators of their classrooms. We've been working with teachers and staff to understand the way that Google Meets works when you have what's called a nicknamed meeting. Google Meets offers through our educational avenue this type of meeting where I don't give it that typical letter combination. I put an actual nickname on it, which gives the teacher more control over the aspects of the Google Meet. What we've been finding is there have been certain classes where there are two adults in the room, where we have the teacher and maybe a teacher who's coming in to do some accommodation work, or they're coming in to add to. And so what we've been counseling staff is the first adult in the room is actually the teacher. And so to the classroom teacher, it feels as though they're not in control, because that control may have been granted to the first adult, who could have been the person who is coming to help with the class. So in using Google, they added the 49 view cameras, and they've also added two other features that will allow teachers to be able to control the chat functions and also who's presenting their screen, giving those adults in the room much more granularity as to what they can do. But that was a release that Google has just put out today that they had announced yesterday.
Thank you. That's fantastic news, and I'm guessing that information will quickly permeate the entire organization, hopefully as soon as tomorrow. So thank you. So with the current limitation of Google Meets, and if there are challenges that teachers have, who do they go to get answers on how to help manage them, especially the new teachers that have just joined, all 500-600 plus that have just joined? How are we providing them the mentorship and the insight that they need to be able to run a classroom effectively, especially in a virtual environment?
So, Mr. Kuhn, as Dr. Scriven was speaking about our local support at schools, our schools all have tech liaisons. Most of our liaisons are classroom teachers themselves, but they've taken on an extra duty in the building. And so we have a network built through Dr. McComas's division and through the Office of Educational, or the Department of Educational Options, that provide guidance to our liaisons to how to do certain aspects of teaching and learning when it comes to the technology tools. So they're provided with a Friday update on new things that are coming out. The features that we were just speaking about, they're going out through a liaison highlight so that those individuals can redeploy that information to their local school. In a school system as large as BCPS, one of the challenges we always find is that last mile communication leg, but this one has proven to be very effective in getting to our teachers to help with that how do I work, so that our new teachers can have resources at their disposal with a local face that they can speak to about how to do the things they need to do.
So, Mr. Corns, the liaison, these are actual teachers that are teaching classes also?
So some liaisons have a full schedule, some have abbreviated schedules, but they have been, for the most part, utilizing time before and after school to deploy these pieces of information back. So yes, they are classroom teachers, but they receive a EPD or extra pay for an assignment that they have, which usually takes place before and after school.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I guess I am concerned, though. I'm just going to follow on. Thank you, Mr. Corns.
That's fine.
If these are teachers that have their own classes to manage, how are they going to be able to engage in the moment with teachers that are having tech issues? They just have to kind of muddle through it until they can deal with it that evening or later? I know these days are packed, so.
Well, Mr. Kuhn, what I would offer is every school every year has a batch of new teachers, if you will, and schools often have touch points of mentorship and support. For example, the tech liaison is one. In some of their schools that are Title I, they were still able to retain their staff development teacher, which could be another resource. In other schools, they may even have another tier where there is an additional faculty member who is a mentor. So you're correct in that there can be moments where teachers are seeking who is the person that is available, but every principal organizes a sort of a multi-tier of support for new teachers. And this year, we've been paying particular attention to new teachers in light of their situation. And so there's really not a single solution to that answer, but rather a multi-tiered solution.
Okay, thank you. Thank you
You're
for
welcome.
that answer.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I do not see the presentation that was shared on board docs, so I'm not able to give the slide or the page. But I know that there was a discussion around special education. And part of my question associated with that is how are we planning early entry for that specific cohort to actually come into school so that they could get instruction one-on-one? I know the planning must be occurring at this point.
So thank you, Mr. Kuhn. Let me respond, Dr. McComas. I'll be updating the board and the community about the next steps. As I shared in my superintendent report about the announcement from Governor Hogan and our state superintendent, we are finalizing and will be communicating the next steps regarding support to students, including the idea of potentially bringing back small groups and looking at how we will prioritize. So yes, we'll be providing some updates regarding that topic. Yes, we'll be looking at our students who are receiving services, whether it's special ed, English language learners, but we'll provide another update to the board and to the community once we have finalized those plans.
Great. And then while we're on the topic, Dr. Salmon had talked, and the state board had talked, and I believe they passed a motion to move forward on 3.5 hours of instruction, synchronous instruction a day. And I was wondering how Baltimore County was going to achieve that since Wednesdays are not necessarily synchronous by design.
So thank you for that. The state board knew that the systems that were going virtually could not just change their schedule overnight, and they gave us a time frame. And actually, the MSDE staff will be eventually supporting us in our direction. So again, we'll be looking to be aligned with what the state board wants us to do with synchronous learning.
Great, I appreciate that. Thank you for this presentation. I look forward to finding out more details.
Thank you. And Dr. Hager?
Yes, I'm last. So most of my questions have been answered. I did want to say that most of the conversations I've had really have involved conversations around special education services. And I too was looking for those slides on board docs and they weren't there. So I apologize if my question was answered at the beginning of the talk, but could someone talk a little bit about the children who require one-on-one support, whether it be for specific tasks throughout the school day or who are through their IEP plan have a paraeducator who sits with them during the school day in a building? What does this look like for them during virtual learning?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Hager. I will attempt to quickly address that just in light of our time. And I just also like to say that the slide that I did use on special education was also part of the presentation to our curriculum committee in August. So you're welcome to look there as well. It's a good question, Dr. Hager, and not an easy one to answer because fundamentally every student's unique learning needs in our context that we are teaching and learning in, whether that's virtual, hybrid, or in person, has to be addressed through the IEP process. And so for students who may have had one-on-one support in a concrete virtual, a brick and mortar building, that needs to come back to the IEP team to be worked through. And again, the IEP team process is the standard process around which all of those conversations have to happen. And so I'm not at liberty to make a broad sweeping answer to that because it is the nature of an individualized plan. That being said, I do know that and understand that families are seeking that opportunity to come to the table and discuss what are the resources needed, what are the resources that match those needs, and how do we, in fact, address student learning needs in this learning context. So again, that's a broad answer, but it is in fact the accurate procedural answer to that. So thank you, because I do understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Dr. Hager, I'm actually last. The question I had related also to special ed, and I appreciate all the board members with this wide variety of questions that really are about helping our students and our families. So with the special education, is there a process where parents whose children did not previously have an IEP, but maybe through the pandemic or through development, they now are having issues that the parent needs addressed? So what information is available to our parents to understand what the process is to maybe ask for a IEP meeting or a student support meeting, just in terms of addressing those new needs that we're seeing many children do have.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Causey. Again, great question. Our normal processes still hold true in this virtual context related to referrals for students to be assessed for special education services. And so the first and foremost thing I would say is have the family member reach out to their school administration to discuss having a referral process considered. And so that's really the first step, whether we were in brick and mortar, a hybrid, or in our current virtual context. Step one, reach out to the school so we can activate the practices and referrals.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And with that, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is the report on the equity audit. And for that, we have Dr. Lisa Williams and Mr. Billy Burke.
Good evening, Chair Causey, Vice Chair Henn, Dr. Williams, and members of the board. Dr. Williams, is there anything you'd like to say before we begin?
Sorry, Billy, I was having technical difficulties over here. So based on the direction of the board, we're giving an overview with the understanding, board members said that we're going to look at the upcoming board agenda for September 29th. And so this presentation was shared with the Equity Committee. And we thank Dr. Lisa Williams for rearranging her schedule to be here with us tonight. We do recognize this is a very important topic, and we thank our Equity Committee Chair, Makita Scott, for raising this topic to be presented tonight. So we're going to do our best, knowing that we'll provide some additional information, and we'll be prepared to do more work on September 29th. So I'll turn it back over to Billy Burke and Dr. Lisa Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. I'd like to echo your sentiments and thank Dr. Lisa Williams for rearranging her schedule tonight and making herself available. Her expertise is always worth listening to. I would offer one perspective before Dr. Williams begins, and that is that sometimes when we review student data and we see disparities, we often start to think that identifies deficits in our students and in children. And I would offer that there's a different perspective you should be taking as you listen to this information. It's more important for us to understand the perspective that what you're going to hear about speaks more to the adults in the organization and what we need to learn and how we need to change our practices in order to meet the needs of the students represented by the data. And with that being said, I'd like to turn things over to Dr. Lisa Williams.
Good evening, everyone. So what I will attempt to do is to be succinct in this presentation, given that we'll have another opportunity to delve more deeply into the implications of its findings. But the idea is that we can use these data to begin to ask ourselves very deep and meaningful questions relevant to Policy 0100 as we think about what is the lay of the landscape of equity work that needs to be addressed across the organization. Next slide, please. So it's really important to frame the conversation in the context of policy. And Policy 0100 states that Baltimore County Public Schools believe that disparities are unacceptable, that it is inequitable to provide the same services to all students when there is evidence that students' needs differ, that we need to be accountable for not engaging in practices that reproduce inequity, and that we should ultimately evaluate our decisions, our practices, and our procedures not just through the lens of our intentions, but we need to be accountable for the actual impacts, particularly when we center the needs of our marginalized students. And as we've considered presentations over the course of this evening, even in the data that are happening right now within the BCPS community, we see disproportionate impacts, disproportionate abilities to access the services and supports that are available. And so what the policy really harkens our attention to is to dialing into the implications of what it means to know that there are different levels of responses, and for the system to launch responses that are, in accordance to what the data would suggest we need to be thinking about. Next slide, please. The mission of the Equity Committee that was usually established is stated. The point of the committee is to really help the system in removing structural, cultural, and barriers that exist across the system that limit opportunities for all students. And this is one of the things I think that is really important for us to understand, that it is through understanding unique needs for different groups of students and responding to those unique needs that the system as a whole becomes stronger. And so it's really important for us to not position this work as either this thing or that thing, but recognition that when all students and student groups have their needs served, it speaks to the larger viability of the system in general. So this is a part of the mission of the work of that committee. And I thank Ms. Scott for her leadership. Next slide, please. So the objectives of this presentation are to really give you some high-level overviews of the trends that can be seen across multiple data sets, to consider these data sets in the context of the policy, equity policy 0100, and then to think about the next steps that would be appropriate as responses to the findings. Next slide, please. And so just a bit of background about the formation of the Equity Committee and the commissioning of the audit. The committee made the decision that in order to ensure we are all on the same foundations in terms of our understanding of the data patterns in the system, it would be appropriate to have an equity audit presented to the team. On June 17th, the Equity Committee had its inaugural meeting. On the 17th of August, the committee convened to discuss the following questions by way of the report that was commissioned. And so the three questions that the report audit was designed to speak to were: what are the gaps in student outcomes? Are the gaps that are identified persistent, meaning are these gaps that exist across multiple years? That gap was operationally defined as 3 or more years. So when I call forward patterns that the data show, you should bear those in mind, that we're talking about patterns that exist in data for 3 or more years. And then the more provocative question from my perspective, and that is, are the gaps actually widening, or do we see some abatement of existing patterns? Next slide, please. So when we look at data describing student outcomes and indicators, specifically through the lens of achievement data, and what is important to think about is that all of these findings are pre-COVID. So when we think about the past 6 months and what's to come, there should be a recognition that these are the challenges that existed for the system prior to this moment of both racial uprisings and pandemic that are having disproportionate impacts on different communities. Next slide, please. So when we look at the achievement data, what it shows, if we look across multiple data sets, and again, I want to be succinct. So data like SAT, data AP, describes our access, achievement data that are relevant for grades K through 8. These are the kinds of pieces of information that we looked at to surmise these trends. And I know that you all have access now to the Word document where the specific data are referenced. So I'm just going to speak in terms of the global findings, because this is what equity work really hearkens us to think about, not so much the numbers, but what are the patterns that we can see across multiple data sets. And when we look at student achievement data, there are pretty clear patterns. We see racial predictability, meaning that white students and Asian students outperform their non-white, Black, Hispanic peers. We see class predictability, where middle-class students perform on average at higher rates than poor students. We see ableist patterns, where students with disabilities underperform when compared with their non-disabled peers. And we see linguistic predictability, where students for whom English is not the first language underperform compared to their peers who are native English speakers. So the point is, when you look at the different data sets, some of the scope of difference will be greater or smaller. But what is important to focus in on is that these are the types of patterns, race, class, special education participation, and language, that you see this consistent predictability around who will perform better. And the only factor that you need to know, if we're looking at achievement data in far too many cases, is where a student might sit around these social identifiers. Next slide, please. So when we look at issues of access, and the proxy or the way that I would frame thinking about access would be access to rigorous course opportunities. So we tend to think about programs like AP, GT, those kinds of more rigorous opportunities. We see similar patterns in access to those experiences as we do to achievement outcomes. Next slide, please. So what you will probably notice is that same social identifiers that showed up for achievement show up in access, meaning you see race predictability, class predictability, special education predictability, and linguistic predictability. Now, mind you, this is a report that level sets to begin our conversation. Certainly there are other questions that we could ask, and some of these things came up during our discussions at the equity meeting, to include looking at intersections around gender. But it is really important for us to sort of rest in the consistency of these types of predictability factors that are pretty replete across the set. Next slide, please. When we look at indicators of climate, similar types of predictability. Could you go to the next slide, please? So specifically, we're going to look at climate through a series of indicators. We'll take a look at climate through suspensions and attendance primarily. And so when we look at the suspension data, what we see is race predictability, we see class predictability, we see participation in special education or ableist predictability, right? These are pretty much the same predictability factors that you see in both access and achievement. So it's important what these data, just these three sets, would tell us that as an organization, we need to be asking questions about what role race is playing in the teaching and learning and engagement experience for students. What role is class or socioeconomic challenges playing in teaching, learning, and engagement opportunities for students? And similarly, the same kinds of questions can be asked through the lens of able-bodiedness, because we see, again, very similar patterns. Next slide, please. And what these data actually give us a little more context around, and I know that these data are in your report, is really a bit of the scope of the gap. So as an example, among elementary schools, when we think about the suspension rate, these data, and Dr. Phillip, if I get this wrong, please correct me. What we see is African American students at the elementary level being suspended at a gap of 1.5% higher than their white peers. Specifically, the other thing that I want to call your attention to in this chart is that the gaps are widened. So what that means is we're having even greater disproportionate proportionality and suspensions of African American students. When we look at the middle school level, we see similar patterns with special education. And then when we look at the high school level and we change the metric from suspension rate to chronic absenteeism, a different group emerges that should be on our radar for concern, and that's the Hispanic Latino population. And again, I want to make the connection back to the conversation that you heard earlier, where we were talking about issues of climate and student connection to the schoolhouse, right? And the different ways in which this particular moment is causing school separation. And bear that in mind for students who are already separated, right? So again, there is a context that make these data even more challenging for us when we sit in the potential implications of what we might find if we were looking at similar data in this particular context. So hopefully that finds resonance. Next slide, please. Going more deeply into an analysis around attendance and absenteeism, we find similar trends. Next slide, please. When we take a look at attendance data, and again, the particulars of how the attendance data were surmised, the operational definitions are in your Word document, but we see racial predictability, class predictability, and age predictability. Hopefully, again, you're making the connection that these issues are across the system, which is why you can see very similar trends. But I will repeat, because I think that sometimes you can request more data sets, and those data sets absolutely do give us a more complete vantage point on what's transpiring. But what I want to call your attention to is the gaps can get smaller or they can get larger, but they still are the same type of predictability, which calls into attention the same issues of structuralism that we've been talking about, quite frankly, pretty openly as an organization also. Next slide, please. Chronic absenteeism. When we look at those students who are experiencing significant absence from school, which is a rudimentary way to think about chronic absenteeism. There is an N that is in your report that operationally defines how many days we're talking. When we talk about chronically absent students, you see race predictability, class predictability, and English predictability. Next slide, please. So in summary, what the data suggests is that there have these inequities across the system when we think about our students in the areas of climate. We have them in the areas of access, and we have them in areas of achievement. And they are similar types of disparities, irrespective of the kind of service that is being offered. So that tells us, or it should at least, raise our attention to the specter of examining system level structures. These inequities, while they vary across the system in terms of scope, you can find them in West Zone, Central Zone, and East Zone, thinking about our students and how we geographically describe our areas. The following student groups had the most notable inequities across each categories: Black students, Hispanic students, students participating in free or reduced meals, our Ls, and our students with disability participate in special education services. So again, I just want to locate these students in our consciousness in this moment as we continue to make decisions about how we respond at present and how we will need to respond in the future, understanding the challenges that the system contended with prior to this disruption. Next slide, please. The next area of data that we took a look at as a committee were data that described the demographics of the staff. So again, I will try to be quick with this presentation. Next slide, please. When we look at staff comprising our elementary schools, these are the statistics that we have. So 90% of our teachers are female and are white women by and large. At the principalship level, 76% are female and 82% of them are white. And then when we look at the assistant principalship pool at the elementary level, 85% are female and 77% are white. And so the question, when we look at the race data through the lens of achievement, access, and climate, and then we juxtapose that with the staff data, we see some significant discontinuity, right? Meaning the percentage of teachers and principals and assistant principals at the elementary level they don't line up with those data trends. And what I would not want you to take from this is the supposition that because we have more white teachers, I'm just isolating elementary school, I'll go through middle and high, that they can't teach students of color. That is not what I would recommend you surmise from these data findings. What I would suggest is that what these data suggest we need to do is a very deep dive into issues of culture, into issues of race, class, and power, quite frankly, to ensure that what we are doing in terms of service delivery is meeting the needs of the students. And sometimes these conversations are not the easiest to have, but certainly these trends should minimally call our attention to the need for these kinds of discussions. Next slide, please. When we look at middle school data, similar trends are noted. 70% of teachers are white and female. When we look at the principalship level, 61% of principals at the middle school level are white and female, approximately 60%. More than that. And then at the assistant principal level, we have 58% of assistant principals are female and white. So similar trends. Next slide, please. At the high school, you see a little more parity, where upward of approximately 56% of teachers are female. Here again, 83% are white. I mean, there's a small distinction between teachers record and tenured teachers. When we look at the principalship, you see 54% are female, so you have more gender parity at the secondary level, specifically at the high school level. 62% of principals at the high school level are white. And then at this assistant principal level, again, closer parity around gender, 52% female. But again, you see that racial discontinuity. And what the statistic you don't have is that 62%, 62 to 64% of students are students of color. So it actually, the discord is pretty significant when we think about this larger question of who the student body is, and then we juxtapose that against the staffing. And if I could give you, we have more time to look at it historically, you see these trends in staffing are pretty stubborn. Next slide, please. And student support data, we did not, as a committee, spend very much time talking about those data, but what I want to invite you to consider at your leisure is the ratio whereby we make assignments of support staff to schools. They are in the budget book. The reason that we did not spend very much time as a committee looking at those data is because they are on a ratio. They don't look at risks. So let's say we knew disproportionalities existed in a given area. We don't support staff in that way. So we apportion these ratios, share that data. Very much. Next slide, please. Next slide. You can move up to the next slide. Thank you. And so what is our primary response vehicle as a system? Well, our first response vehicle is the compass. And in the creation of the compass, each of the superintendent's priority areas have been identified. And through those priority areas, the question of what does it look like to move equity into action has been addressed. Now, certainly the work will be to ensure that within those priority areas and the desired application of an equity lens, that we're being mindful of the nexus between that equity work and the different student identifiers, whereby we have some work to do around looking at the question of system sufficiency. So what will really matter is how we actually theorize around interrupting these disproportionalities that, again, are not just in this year's data set or last year's data set. What the equity audit showed are data set with disproportionalities of 3 years or greater. And I would actually say that these trends have been in the data for as long as I've been looking at them. Next slide, please. Further, it is really important, particularly given all of the provisions that have just been completed on policy paper 100, that policy is situated in the midst of this conversation. So what do we say in policy about our application of an equity lens to various areas of function across the organization? What are the trends that the evidence would suggest that we need to take a look at in terms of system structure? How does the compass speak to that? And then how do we put all of those things together to ensure that we are launching the most robust response, particularly now when we know the needs will be expressly greater than they were even before this moment. Last slide. After the next slide. So it is the last slide. So at this point, I will stop and ask if there are any questions.
Dr. Williams, this is Dr. Lisa Williams. This is Ms. Causey. Again, we just want to thank you for taking time out to provide this information and this very important update to the board. Again, I would just go around the dais and ask board members for brief questions or comments. We are in the interest of time. So let's see. So I'll start with Dr. Hager.
I have no additional questions.
Thank you. And as we mentioned, we do want to have an agenda item on the next board meeting related to further evaluation of this. So if board members want to send in questions or comments at another time, we can do that. But Ms. Pasteur?
You want Mr. Kuhn? He's next.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have your video on, so I just saw you.
But I had your back, Mr. Kuhn.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation. I'm actually staring at the document that was just sent out, trying to make sense of the numbers. One of the questions I have, because I wasn't at the original presentation and the deep dive, when you're talking about widening, does that mean that the gap by a percentage is getting bigger? Is that what that means?
That's exactly what that means.
Okay. So if we're looking at a gap that says 6%, right? And then it is widening 20%, is that over a year or over those 3 years it's gotten 20% bigger? How does that work out?
So I want to invite Dr. Wheatley-Phillips to give the particulars, but as I understand it, if the researchers look at the data, let's say 3 years ago, that would have been the baseline. So the question is, if I looked at 2016, what's happening by 2020? And what I understand to be happening is that the gaps are growing. Now, what I would say to you is what is simultaneously happening at the same time is we are getting more students in the district that we're already struggling to ensure what we're providing in terms of access to teaching, learning, and engagement is sufficient. We're getting more of those students. So it would make sense that the gaps are getting wider because we've really got to look at this question of the sufficiency of services for populations that have been historically marginalized. But I'll create some space for Dr. Phillips to affirm if that interpretation was correct.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Dr. Williams. And just so, Mr. Coons, for your information, a gap means that we're looking at specific benchmarks and looking at the students who met those benchmarks and the students who didn't. That creates the gap. The persistent piece is where it really extended for 2 of the 3 years in which we pulled these data for this report. And when we talk about the gap that's widening, it really is looking at between year 1 that we pull the data and year 3, where that gap continues between year 1 and it actually extends into year 3. So the way Dr. Williams described it is, Dr. Lisa Williams described it is accurate, but the gap means it's wider in year 3 than it was in year 1. And
in essence, that's showing us a bad or a poor trend. It's going in the wrong direction if it's widening.
Absolutely.
At all.
Absolutely, because we're saying that for our students who should be meeting expectation, we have a group of students that are not meeting the same level of expectations of a larger group of students, and that is continuing and is also widening over time. And in particular, it really is looking at the 5 student groups that Dr. Williams talked about, which are Black African American students, our Hispanic Latino students, students eligible for farm services, as well as those receiving English learner services and also special education services. Those are primarily the 5 groups in which the data show the gaps exist, they are persisting, and they're also widening.
Thank you. I look forward to a deeper dive.
Ms. Pasteur?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Williams, for joining in on this. And thank you, Dr. Wheatley Phillips, for working with those numbers. So really, what beyond that, what I just is a statement, and I look forward to our next board meeting where we can go into some of this a little bit more. But I need to say that I've been in Baltimore County long enough to have seen a world of difference, MAP, JESSA, TESSA, etc. We've been talking about these gaps for a very long time. And because I represent District 2, I not only can see the gap widening just in those numbers, but also seeing changes in the schools that when I came in weren't a part of those numbers. Now they greatly are. So I look forward to the next meeting. However, and this is not so much to Dr. Lisa Williams and Dr. Wheatley Phillips, but I look forward to us having conversations, starting conversations now about how we are going to change some of these things. And I think the compass gives us the direction. Okay, I really hated going there. All right, but that compass does really do that. It points to our being able to make those changes. But I do have to say, having been around a long time and been a part of all of those things that I named, that I need us to get beyond those numbers and start working about changing that, both in terms of staffing and how we support our students. That's what I'll be looking forward to hearing at our next meeting, how we get started with making those changes. But thank you so much for putting there. People like the numbers. Now let's do something about them finally. Thank you.
Mr. Offerman, do you have questions or comments? We'll move on to Mr. Mahamza, and if Mr. Offerman comes back online. Mr. Mahamza?
I don't have any comments, but I just want to thank Dr. Lisa Williams, Mr. Burke, and Ms. Monique Phillips for this great presentation. And I look forward to the further conversations. And thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Henn?
No questions or comments, but likewise, thank you for the presentation, Dr. Williams.
Ms. Joes?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Williams, Dr. Monique Phillip, and Mr. Berg. And like the other board members, I look forward to the second presentation. And now that we see the numbers, I look forward to finding solutions, and that is to Dr. Darrell Williams. Thank you.
Mr. McMillian, question or comments?
Dr. Lisa Williams, thank you for the late notice and coming in and presenting to us. Thank you very much.
Ms. Mack? Ms. Mack, we cannot hear you.
I'd like to thank Dr. Williams not only for the presentation tonight, but the work that she's done with the Equity Committee and on which I am a member. I'd also like to thank her for allowing me to even contact her after various meetings to pick her brain a little bit more and discuss information at a deeper level. So I too look forward to the next meeting when we can dig into this. And I echo Ms. Pasteur's responses that I look forward to doing the work and making this different.
Ms. Scott?
Yes, thank you. I would like to, again, I echo what others have said, thank Dr. Lisa Williams, thank Mr. Billy Berg, as well as thanking Dr. Wheatley Phillips for all of the work that they've done in compiling the information for the equity audit. And I feel that it was very important. And as Dr. Lisa Williams told me, this had not in this form been done before at BCPS. So I think the information that they've been able to compile is very informative, very important. And I look forward to taking the next steps to how we will work with that information that we have received. As I said earlier with COVID-19, it's not business as usual. And as Dr. Lisa Williams said, the gaps are widening. And it is incumbent upon us to take steps to address those issues that have been laid before us. So I think this is a good first step, and I look forward to what we will do next, and as others have said, what we will hear at the next board meeting. Thank you.
Ms. Rowe, a question or comment?
I have no questions or comments other than just thank Dr. Lisa Williams for her presentation and for her work, and I look forward to the future progress and hearing recommendations on what we can do.
Thank you. And Dr. Darrell Williams, did you want to have any comments to wrap up Dr. Lisa Williams' presentation for us?
So, Dr. Williams, Lisa Williams, and Billy Burke, we have had many conversations. I'm thinking at this point for the next presentation, I'm happy to dive in a little bit deeper, Dr. Lisa Williams, about the system improvement team and that work that is positioned for us as a system to start analyzing data, looking at our practices, establishing new routines, and it's getting to, I will say, all of our focus areas that are associated with the compass. And so I look forward to that next presentation. So I want to thank you all for your time and attention.
Well, Ms. Causey, are there any other questions or any other board members?
No, we have worked through all the board members, so we really appreciate you coming, and we look forward to the next steps. I did have one question that was raised as a part of the next presentation in terms of one of our groups where the gaps seem to be widening is our special education groups. So I'm going to put a request in with Dr. Darrell Williams now to see if we can have, as a part of that, our new executive director, Dr. Catherine Pirandozzi, to be a part of that presentation and conversation.
Yeah. If I may, really quickly, because it's late.
Certainly.
and certainly this is a fairly nuanced conversation. We present the data discreetly, so it'll show special education, students of color, but those groups are not discrete. So one of the things that I'm hopeful that we're able to do is to look at the intersections so we can see vulnerability on a spectrum, because I think that will really help us to think about how we move forward in ways that are far more nuanced. So just trigger that for me. So I just want to offer that.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Okay, so we will move on to our next item. We have item O, unfinished business, consideration of the fiscal year 2022 state capital budget request. And for that, I will call forward Dr. Scriven and Mr. Dixit. Gentlemen, we have discussed this before. Did you have additional information or for the board? Or are you just available for questions?
No, we did not have any additional information at this time. We know that the capital budget was introduced on August 11th. We had our work session on August 25th. We're simply seeking board approval for the superintendent's proposed FY 2022 state capital budget recommendation at this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the superintendent's proposed fiscal year 2022 state capital budget request?
So moved. Hen?
Is there a second?
Second,
Matt,
Kuhn.
second. Oh,
Mr. Kuhn is second. Any discussion, board members? May I have a roll call vote, Ms. Gover?
Dr. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Ms. Pasteur?
Yes.
Mr. Mahomza?
Yes.
Ms. Hen?
Yes.
Ms. Causey?
Yes.
Ms. Jost?
Yes.
Mr. McMillian?
Yes.
Ms. Mack?
yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Rowe?
Yes.
Thank you.
The motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate all your work on this. The next item is new business, contract awards, and for that I call on Building and Contracts Committee Chair, Ms. Julie Henn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tonight, the board's Building and Contracts Committee voted unanimously to recommend items N1 through N14 to the board for approval.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve items N1 through N14?
So moved, Mac.
There's no second needed since it comes with a recommendation from the committee. Is there any discussion, board members? Hearing none, may I have a roll call vote?
Dr. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Ms. Pasteur?
Yes.
Mr. Mahomza?
Yes.
Ms. Hen?
Yes.
Ms. Causey?
Yes.
Ms. Jost?
Yes.
Mr. McMillian?
Yes.
Ms. Mack?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Rowe?
Yes.
Thank you.
The motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Henn. The next item on the agenda is item P, board member comments. And I will go around the dais seeking comments. If I could ask board members to be a little more brief than usual, just given the late hour and that tomorrow is a school day. So we can start this evening with Dr. Hager.
Hi. Hello, everyone. So I just wanted to say that given my training and experience in public health and my role in the School of Medicine, that I stand by the school board's decision to start the year virtually. Having said that, I also believe we need to figure out a safe way for some of our students to return in person sooner rather than later. And I also wanted to sincerely thank all the teachers and staff and administrators for their hard work this year and wish the students good luck. And last but not least, get your flu shot, everyone. It's best to be safe and healthy so that we can all return to school sooner rather than later. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Kuhn?
All right, I just want to welcome everyone back to school. I know it's been a little over a week. I know that there was a lot of preparation to make all of this happen. And I am hoping that we work the kinks out quickly so that students are getting the education that we aim to provide them. So I just want to wish everybody the best of luck doing that. And I look forward to our next meeting and discussion of possibly getting some kids actually into school. Thank you.
Ms. Pasteur?
Yes, thank you. I came to Baltimore County in 1988. I've been a proud part of Baltimore County, but I have to say I have never been more proud than I am watching the opening, because staff and parents and children have been truly under the gun. And with all of the ups and downs and ins and outs and not wanting this and not wanting that, not liking this and not liking that, we've still done it. And we're still educating our young people. I truly am proud of all of the folks who have a part of BCPS-1. Congratulations. And that includes members of the board who have been out and about talking to constituents, asking questions, and doing the work.
Thank you, Ms. Pasteur. Mr. Offerman has left the meeting. Okay. Mr. Mahamza?
I'll reiterate what other board members have said. I want to welcome everybody back to school. We're going to continue listening to the concerns of constituents and forwarding those concerns to the administrations. And we hope these questions and issues are addressed promptly. Other than that, I look forward to meeting with more students and partaking in other student council events. And lastly, I want to say Happy Hispanic Heritage Month. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Henn?
Thank you. So certainly this will be one school opening that I don't think anyone will ever forget. And if it's taught me one thing, it's that how much we truly do depend on one another, teachers, staff, parents, and students. And with that, I'd like to share a posting that moved me especially, and it's from one of our parents. She writes, "Today, I tried to listen in to as many of their classes as I could. One teacher was so super excited that class flow worked. Bless her heart, it brought tears to my eyes how excited she was. Another teacher shared that she had her first and third graders in the same room and apologized in advance if she had to leave for a second to attend to them. She did a fantastic job. One student had trouble saving something, and I heard the teacher calming her down and helping her. In another class, the teacher thought she was presenting her PowerPoint, and she wasn't, and the kids brought that to her attention, and she was very thankful. I heard teachers helping the kids helping the teachers, and fellow classmates helping each other. All of the teachers were so supportive. The kids were patient and kind. Despite the circumstances and the logging in issues, I'm calling it a very successful day. Thank you, teachers. We notice your hard work." I notice it too. Thank you, teachers. Thank you, parents. Thank you, students. And thank you, staff and everyone in Team BCPS.
Ms. Joes?
No comments. Good night, all.
Mr. McMillian?
Yes, yes, yes. I've lost the earplug. Just hold on just briefly. I've lost an earplug. Okay, here I'm ready. I want to thank everyone for all the hard work in preparing for the virtual return. Having said that, I sincerely hope Central staff is developing a speedy plan for a near future live opening, especially for elementary age children and all students with IEPs and 504 plans. I'm extremely happy the public will have the opportunity to speak live at future Board of Education meetings. I encourage the public to sign up and have your voices heard. Earlier this evening, Ms. Pasteur mentioned a new model. As I said in July, public education has not met the needs of all of our students for decades. We need to take advantage of the opportunity the pandemic has presented us to develop a new process. The high school students who love virtual learning and are productive should be allowed to continue. Why put those students back in traditional classrooms? I'm going to use a sports analogy, give those students the ball and let them run with it. Thank you.
Ms. Mack?
Well, Ms. Henn stole my thunder a little bit, but I saw a posting that I thought encapsulates how I feel about how things went. A parent wrote, "Listen, I know this first week of the 2020 school year is not what any of us expected, but I've got to say the BCPS teachers at my kids' school have done a great job so far. The schedules are thoughtful and the lessons are adapted to this unique situation we're in. I can't imagine how long it took them to put all of this together. Shout out to the teachers helping to make normal out of the abnormal. You're appreciated." This parent also posted, on a lighter note, just a reminder that your children are telling all your business in their virtual classes. So far today, I've learned that someone's mom is having surgery tomorrow, someone is allergic to eggs, and someone's dog died a long time ago, and it's only 9:33 a.m. Have a great evening, everybody.
Ms. Scott?
Yes, I would like to echo Mr. Holmes' statements for Hispanic Heritage Month to all of our students. Happy Hispanic Heritage Month to you all. And I would also like to say to all the parents out there who are dealing with various different things that come along with logging in virtually, Google Meets, Schoology, and everything else, to hang in there. It is a new learning experience for us all, and it's not something that we would have anticipated, but we are here, and so it's just very, very, I would just say that I would like to thank all of our teachers and administrators and principals and everyone for all their hard work and what they're all doing, and wish everyone a wonderful week and have a great school year. Thank you.
Ms. Rowe?
Yes, I would just like to echo what other board members have said and just thank teachers and staff and parents. This is a very difficult situation that we're going through, and I think that if we can remember to try to have patience not only with each other but with the situation as a whole, then we will get through this and continue improving whatever things still need to be improved.
Thank you. And the final agenda item is announcements. Our next meeting is Tuesday, September 29th at 6:30 p.m. And again, there is new information about our new public comment process, so we encourage members to do that. I also want to appreciate all of the board members that are so engaged, and even though the pandemic has provided their own disruptions and their own struggles with family and health and economics and logistics, that we are all in this together, and it is all hands on deck, and we will continue the work, continue to make improvements for all of our students and to support our families. And so to the teachers, have a great day tomorrow, and we will be discussing this again and hearing more updates. So thank you and good night. The meeting is